Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for the grand finale of the Case King Pro Series here in Season 10. Yes, after 12 very long adrenaline-fueled weeks, we have finally got to that all-important final round where we have a duel going down to the very last minute between Kareckas and Nicholas Houben. And here at the Temple of Speed, they're going to have to lay it all down on the line to see who is going to end up being champion. And also brilliantly that we've got the guarantee of a new champion for this season. Will it be Kareckas, who has been there over the last couple of seasons, really being amongst the very best, but didn't get a single victory until this season, where he now has 4 to his name. He has been in very fine form, and Nicholas Houben, Mr. Consistency, other than a single no-show, which is the only time that really he's had any sort of poor results during the course of his championship. He has kept himself alive in that fight with the Unicorns of Love Mercedes all the way to this track. And maybe, you know, we've had a bit of a back and forth in terms of which cars have been stronger at certain circuits. Maybe this Monza layout will be the one that allows Houben to put a bit more of a charge towards the front of the field. We'll have to wait and see, and we'll go through a little bit of a run through of kind of the circumstances for each of our drivers. So if you're Kareckas right now, you have that additional points margin. You are in a position where you just have a little bit of a more comfortable time in terms of where you sit, but do not allow you to just get too comfortable with things, because with the hard charging German not too far behind, it can still very much be all to play for. So if Nicholas Houben wins this race, then Kareckas has to finish no higher than 5th place for Houben to be champion. If Houben finishes P2, Kareckas cannot finish higher than P7. Houben finishes P3, Kareckas P8, P4 for Houben, P10 for Kareckas, P5 for Houben, and then P11 for Kareckas. So a little bit staggered through those points margins, but the maximum points difference that each of those circumstances would leave us with is 24. And if you're paying close attention to the tally that we have going on through the sheet at the moment, you'll be able to see that we're talking in the thousands of points. Currently, our driver sitting on over 13,000 points in the case of Kareckas, and we're talking about points differences that can end up ranging anywhere between 4 points and 24. And now, of course, depending on how things play out tonight, it could be a little bit larger than that, but these are the margins these guys are working with, and this is what we've got used to in the Pro Series. Absolutely separated by nothing in every single session, every race, and now going all the way to the end of a championship to really put on a fantastic show for us. And I have no doubt that between those two drivers that we will be in for a treat. So speaking of where we are at for this round, I said, of course, we're at the Temple of Speed Monza race circuit, a fantastic circuit that has such a wide array of heritage and history. 11 turns of action-packed goodness and a lot of flat-out stuff to really rev out those engines and get a lovely bit of audio from each of these cars. We'll make sure to go on for a couple of onboards at times with the likes of these Porsches, Mercedes, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, so many great cars. Down in towards that first chicane, it can get very busy on the opening lap, but if you get through there okay, you're on for a pretty good lap through the turn 3 and then in towards that second chicane there, where it can be very tricky to get the line right. Then through the 2 Lesmos onto this back straight that isn't quite straight, but is certainly a long flat-out section, and then possibly the most technical part of this track comes at you thick and fast through the Ascari chicane. Really have to be careful about how much you're taking in terms of the curbs through there and making sure the car is nicely balanced through that series of corners. You want good straight line speed around here, of course, and then down towards Parabolica, where you want to then round out the lap in a nice, neat and tidy fashion to get yourself through this 5.8 kilometer circuit as quickly as you possibly can. So our drivers will be making their way in towards practice in just a moment, and then we can have a little bit of a look at what they are doing in these final few moments before they get dialed in for qualifying. So as it is another round for this championship, and it is the 4th installment of a 90-minute race of this championship, which gives us a little bit more to play with in terms of strategy, particularly if we do have some changeable conditions in there as well. Then it does provide some opportunity for us to get some even more exciting parts of the racing, and possibly, you know, if you're the likes of Kareckas, and, you know, we'll see how things play out, but if you're in a nice, comfortable position, you just want things to stay as they are. You don't want any surprises. You only tend to want surprises when you're on the back foot, and neither one of our drivers is going to want to be on the back foot for this final round. But it certainly provides us a lot of drama when those things do start to happen. So we'll see how everybody is getting on in terms of their final bits of preparation, because you can take 2 different approaches in this final piece of practice. You can either really look to try to optimize your qualifying pace, get yourself as far up the order as possible, or do you just try to maximize your race pace? Of course, in a 90-minute session in particular, that becomes ever more crucial, and that'll be a really interesting approach for certain drivers to be taking. But of course, Monza, that turn 1 chicane, I mean, the first and second chicane are such busy and scary places of this circuit. Every driver wants to be getting through there cleanly. You know, there is no doubt about it that this full grid of extremely talented drivers will be trying to minimize any sort of form of contact. But when you have drivers that are battling for some pretty tasty prizes in the final round of the season, some of these drivers, they don't have so much in the way to lose, and they'll just be trying to get every advantage they can on the opening lap. And when you put all that together, it can get a little bit busy and interesting. Hopefully, we'll have a fairly clean run through turn 1. Thankfully, I actually have a nice new wooden desk that I can touch wood with on that to make sure that I haven't cursed anything. We'll see if that's a foolproof method in around 20 minutes' time. So, of course, alongside our 90-minute race, we will still have our normal 15 minutes of qualifying, where drivers will be looking to try to put in the best lap that they possibly can to start themselves as far up the order as they possibly can. And, you know, looking at the championship, how this has gone back and forth. You know, we have the Porsche, the new Porsche, of course. We've actually seen 2 generations of that car through this championship for Kareckas, whilst Houben has been sporting that Unicorns of Love Mercedes that we've had now for around, I think, a couple of years. And so far, that car has proven to be a very good platform consistently throughout the season. Of course, combined with a driver who's very experienced on ACC and is able to extract lap time out of that car. It's not always the easiest package to naturally get time out of it, but when you do, you have a very competitive car indeed. And around this circuit, you know, of course, it's the Templar speed. You need straight line speed capability, and the one thing that the Porsche is not always the best at doing is going quickly in a straight line. And when you've got the likes of these Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, you know, especially if we had the McLaren, the new McLaren in here. Of course, a lot of drivers who have already been in this championship, once they've made a car selection, they commit to that car selection throughout the rest of the season. So that's why we're not seeing too much in the way of the new McLaren. But we'll have to see if there's any sneaking around that I haven't found just yet. As sort of big moment, a good evasive action from the BMW, just by I'm not quite sure who that was, but that shows you exactly how technical and how tricky this car chicane can be. And wasting no time at all trying to get himself dialed in and to the top of the timing sheets, Nicholas Houben in that lovely Mercedes on a 47.337, exactly a tenth of a second clear of Castorino in the McLaren. How wonderful. So I think the McLaren's now been in ACC for around 2 of our last races, but we haven't had anybody that has joined to showcase off. Now we finally can actually see maybe what this car is capable of doing in the LFM setting. I've been keeping an eye on a few other races, a few other streams from time to time. It does look like overall this new 720S Evo, it's a pretty quick car. I do remember Jardier having a little bit of a gripe with it. Slow speed cornering, it seemed to struggle a little bit with grip. As you see, Castorino absolutely hopping over those curves. You wouldn't be able to get away with that in pre 1.9 physics. But I tell you what, look at that. He's going very quickly, almost half a second up. This is only practice, remember, but that McLaren, what a statement that would be for that car, and what a way it would be to translate things over into Season 11 if the McLaren were to get up to the tippy top of the standings at the end of the final round of Season 10. And by just over 4 tenths of the first man into the 46s, Amedeo Castorino, the Italian driver, who is going to carry on for a lap, so we will in fact go on board with him. Goes to the top of the timesheet, so try and spot your braking point in towards this first chicane. They're very tricky. Got to avoid those sausage curbs on each of the apexes, and then absolutely flat to the floor on exit. See, he's already gained about a tenth of a second, so finding time already in the lap. And you carry all of that momentum through Curva Grande. You can see just letting it run out slightly wide to the left-hand side, then back over to the right-hand side. Smart enough, breaking around the 100-meter mark, down the gears and into second then. Trying to take as much curve as he can get away with. Maybe a little bit too much, but I tell you what, he's going mighty fast on this lap. Lerner, in the meantime, up towards P2. It's a bit wide, though, at the first Lesmo. That'll lose him time. Using up all of that AstroTurf on the exit. He'll do the same again, maybe even a bit more. You can really go out wide here. See, almost dipping a wheel on the grass over to the left-hand side. He now blasts his way down this back straight, and he is still up on his previous time. Currently purple in 2 out of 3 sectors on his previous best. See what this lap turns out to be, braking just after the bridge, and then trying to get it all nicely done, playing around with the gears, then trying to get the rotation in on the entry, but then maximise the traction on the exit. Beautifully set up through there. The McLaren absolutely gliding over these curves. I'll tell you what, there's some extra company in here tonight, because I've just noticed Bastian Richter is in the server, currently sitting P3, and I'll tell you what, that could be a very interesting addition for this evening into Parabolica. And rounding out the lap, and Castorino putting in an absolute blinder. So is Richter, though, 5 tenths of a second up on his previous best. So for Castorino, 46.4 from him. And Bastian Richter also in the McLaren. Unicorns of Love car, no custom livery for this one. Oh, it's a bit of a hop and a skip and a jump. Not quite the same fate as we saw for Solstov, but now this brings in a very interesting thing, because we've got some of these other additions where we've got the likes of Castorino, we've got Richter in these McLarens, and of course we've got some other very fast drivers in here as well. We've got Simonov in here, I think is in 296. I can't quite tell exactly from that camera angle, but Bastian Richter, he could be a very pivotal man in tonight's race. Of course, granted, Kareckas still has quite a few teammates around him, but whether they quite manage to get themselves to the same pace as those up at the front of the field to be able to help Grantis in tonight's action, we'll have to wait and see. But Bastian Richter is a man that in a car that's already looking to be very competitive, I can very much imagine being a very good rear gunner to Houben tonight. And of course, I mean, you need a bit more than just one position difference between Kareckas and Houben if Houben was to become champion, but whether or not Richter can play he can be the Sergio Perez here tonight in this race, and maybe put a little bit of a cat amongst the pigeons for the Lithuanian driver to try to contend with. We'll have to see how it all plays out. Kareckas right now, here's a lap good enough for P6, because we don't know exactly what fuel loads these drivers are running. So we could see things chop and change somewhat once we make our way over into qualifying and then into the race. Of course, with the race as well, it being a slightly longer event, we do have a little bit more variability, like I say, when it comes to strategy, but also potentially there are some chances we could have some mixed conditions. Now, admittedly, forecast-wise, it is fairly low, statistically speaking. We are more likely in for a dry race tonight than not, but it certainly is something that could be playing into effect. And if anything, I would imagine Kareckas would be wanting some rain, because the Porsche, particularly in his hands, is very, very good in wet conditions. He has shown that time and time again, and when you have those wet conditions, it helps just reduce those margins somewhat in terms between the cars. It becomes a little bit more skill dependent on what you can extract out of the car, exactly how confident in the car you are feeling, and of course it slightly dampens the capabilities where you've got these cars that maybe can take these curbs that a bit more aggressively, can carry that bit more straight line speed running low downforce. when you're in wet conditions, you don't tend to be driving around in that same sort of way. So that could actually help out the Porsche and give it a little bit more pace. Currently, one of the few drivers remaining is on improvement. Actually, Kareckas did find a little bit of time. There's also Florian Duakop here in the BMW. As Kareckas does go up to second place. But I tell you what, that time from Castorino, representative or not, in terms of fuel load, looking mighty fast. And we have just made our way over then in towards this qualifying session. Track is at optimal conditions and no rain on the way for any of our drivers to be worrying about, so they will get their heads down. And actual fact of you, Walsingham, by the looks of it, is going to be leading the way. So I'll tell you what, the Unicorns of Love roster have certainly turned up in numbers tonight. Of course, between Veloce and Yassit, that are sister teams, Veloce and Karekkas' corner, as such, has been fairly well kind of backed by the likes of Jardier, and also we've got Valentin Samir in the third tonight as well. So there's about 4 drivers that will be looking to back Grantus in tonight's action. Switch over to the Unicorns of Love side. We now have, of course, Houben, we have Richter, we have Duakop as well. I'm just having a little scroll through the rest of this grid, and it doesn't look like there are any more than that. So it's 4 drivers to 3, but maybe a little bit fairer than what we've seen in the past, because I think those 4 drivers for the Veloce Yassit kind of crew, generally speaking, they have been there throughout the majority of the championship, whereas Houben's getting a little bit more of a backing tonight. So still not quite all of the odds in his favour, but whether or not, the mix of drivers, of course, we're looking at only a handful of positions where it needs to be that margin between the drivers in order for potentially Houben to end up taking that championship if he does get the advantage. But, there are some very quick drivers in the field tonight. They'll just be looking to get a victory. Remember now, here in the Case King Pro Series Championship, you can win prizes every single week just for taking a victory. So they are certainly going to be absolutely gunning it in this final round, no doubt about it. And a lot of drivers certainly in it for themselves. But hop on board your race winner from last time out, Aidan Walsingham, who took a stellar victory ahead of Marco Bischoff and Teemu Karppinen in the Ferrari 296. Seeing what this car can do, of course. This will certainly be the home favourite if we were actually in Italy at the moment. But of course, a lot of representation, a lot of different fans of different drivers, both in this championship and in the chat. So for Visceral Esports, has seen good support for Walsingham over recent races. I'm sure he will have the same once again. Down towards into the second chicane he goes. Obviously very low profile roof on this car, so we don't quite get the reference of the bridge, but that looks very nicely negotiated. And tell you what, this Ferrari, even now, it has had a few tweaks, but it still has this very much prototype feel to it. It is absolutely glued to the circuit, and whilst admittedly you'll see Walsingham with these little micro corrections, he tries to eke out the rotation everywhere that he can and get these extra little snippets of pace. Generally speaking, this car is very well planted, it works well in a lot of conditions, very good at taking care of its tyres, and it certainly is one that is likely to be quick in this race, especially in the hands of this British driver. Not quite as settled through there as we saw the likes of the McLaren. See, just a little bit more of an oscillation after each of those bumps. Castorino was really able to just jump over those curbs and immediately settle. It was like watching the 2023 Red Bull at Monaco, for anyone that saw that clip coming through that final chicane. Every other car was just having a little bit of a hop and a skip and a jump through the second part of the apex. The Red Bull just glided through there like a butterfly, and that's really what that McLaren was looking like in practice. Walsingham, though, for his opening effort, is going to go to the top of the timing sheets on a 46.990, but we've already seen times half a second clear of that. Simonov puts in his effort in the Motor Sharks esports car, go quarter of a second quicker. Did see that this man, Florian Duakop, was looking pretty speedy at some points. Goes P3. Castorino, 0.4 of a second clear of the rest of the field at the moment. That McLaren looking very, very fast. And the Italian driver certainly looking to make a very big statement in his first qualifying session, I believe, in the Pro Series, as he's flashing the lights of someone in front of him to try to make sure they don't hold him up on his lap. We'll look a bit further down the field. So another one of the McLarens is certainly a man to be looking out for. Bastian Richter, another one of our German drivers for the Unicorns of Love lineup. Number 29 car seeing what he can do as he goes towards the timing beam, and it's quick, but not quite quick. Oh, it's joint first. I was saying not quite quick enough. Well, it's about as quick enough as you can be and still to lose. But Bastian Richter, purple in Sector 2 and Sector 3. And purple now lying with the Italian, who is already finding time. He's found 2/10s. Bastian Richter finding a 10th, but a little bit slow exit out of turn 2. So we'll have to try to see if he can find the time elsewhere in this lap. Further down the order, improvements for the likes of Soldatov and Frey. Funny 4/10s up. That could see them jump nicely towards the top 10. That McLaren just looks like an absolute dream to drive, and he got a stellar exit through there as well. 0.3 of a second gained for Castorino. He could even be looking to make into the 45s at this rate, which would be an absolutely massive time for the number 19 car. Let's see. What can he do? Running out through Parabolica. It's looking good. Can Amadeo get in towards the 45? He crosses the line, and he does. And it's not by a small margin either. A 45.892. Incredible pace from the Italian. Goes back to the pits, and I imagine he'll be wiping his hands very happily with that. May even just be sitting there and will sit back and relax. So I imagine he'll be looking to go again. But I'll tell you what, the margin right now that he has over the likes of these other drivers, I mean, there's 4/10 to Richter. It's 8/10 down to Walsingham. So these two McLarens in this field, absolutely massively on the pace right now. And I'll tell you what, someone else that isn't looking too shabby either is Kareckas. He's managed to get himself up in a P4, almost best of the rest at the moment. 13 thousandths behind Walsingham. Crucially, as another one of the McLarens, Zampedri for Team Racing Points slots himself between Castorino and Richter. And I'll tell you what, there's suddenly a car that's looking like it could be dominant tonight as Nicholas Houben. That's the man I was looking for, and that is crucial. So currently, Uzi is going to back out of that effort and look to put in another one. We'll keep an eye on his teammate, Richter, who has just started another lap. He's already found a 10th of a second. But Houben right now is about, he's split that difference between the McLarens and between those behind. Now, with those McLarens in front, and as Richter then abandons a lap himself, as Zampedri looking very quick at the end of the first sector, so we'll keep an eye on the Italian drivers. He makes his way into the second Lesmo. Houben is going to need some extra drivers to put himself between, between himself and Kareckas. And I'll tell you what, qualifying right now is providing just that, unless Kareckas, who is heading down towards the final corner, is getting quite a nice tow off one of the Lamborghinis in front. He's found 0.2 of a second. It would be there or thereabouts to try to displace the likes of Houben and Walsingham. So it's going to be very close by the looks of it, at least in terms of qualifying margins. Hutchinson up towards P2, so it's not going to be easy for our title contenders to take a victory here tonight. But Kareckas, what can he do? Only good enough for P5, but crucially, just a few thousandths of a second ahead of his championship rival. And if he even remotely finishes within neighbouring positions of Houben, that is it, done and dusted. Kareckas will be your champion. So he doesn't need to win here tonight. Houben really does need to absolutely maximise his performance from this race. It all gets a little bit busy with drivers coming out of the pit lane. Castorino starting out another lap, a little bit back and forth with his Delta already, as Hutchinson has abandoned his lap. He did look like he found a 10th. Purple in the middle sector for the number 5 car. So see what he can do. Also want to see if I can, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the speed traps for some of these cars and see how about they are getting on, and whether or not the likes of the McLaren, the BMWs, the Ferraris, and Mercedes. Which one of these cars is crucially going to have a straight line speed advantage? Because when it comes to racing around here at Monza, my goodness, talk about fine margin. Walsingham trying to make the distance of a line as small as possible, and I don't even think you could have got a piece of paper between the two wing mirrors. I think, if anything, that piece of paper may have been horribly destroyed if collision physics between the two mirrors was actually enabled, because that was very, very close between the Ferraris. That's maybe a little bit too much curb, and I think that's an invalidation, in fact, for Amadeo. So, I'll tell you what, though, that is a massive amount of curve for the McLaren to take and still actually survive fairly nicely in all of that. He will start another lap, and somebody is trying to get a toe off him. I think that might be Nico Pendant, who currently sits in P13. Vanting barrier for Yassi, gets himself up into P7. Crucially, though, Nicholas Houben, oh, that was very close on the exit, just about managing to keep it within the bounds. And you see again, he's dipping wheels into the gravel, and I don't think it's particularly helped him. You do need to try to widen up his corners as much as you possibly can, but you've got to be really careful not to push that little bit too hard. You see Bastian Richter, his teammate, doing exactly the same in the background there. We'll keep an eye, though, on Houben, see how he fares through that chicane. Again, it was definitely better settled by the looks of it than the Ferrari, as I hear a dip in the gravel 4. I think the BMW that was following. But it just doesn't look like it glides quite as easily as the McLaren. That's a little bit of a surprise, because the Mercedes traditionally has been an exceptional car over curbs. It still is. But maybe with the setup that Houben has, it's a little bit back and forth between whether or not you get that really nice buttery smooth run or not. Houben does not improve. I tell you what, though, this man is teammates who could be very, very important for tonight's fight in the championship standings. He's found half a second. That's exactly what he needs. Towards the line, Richter goes, and it's good enough for pole position at the moment by 1.5 tenths of a second. But Castorino, he's going quickly. He's found the 10th. It looks like a nicer run through the exits of the Ascari chicanes. He comes down in towards Parabolica now. Zampedri's found 2 tenths to make that 3 on his lap as well. And Castorino, he's found a little bit on the entry towards Parabolica, but maybe he's gone a little bit too deep. Oh, it's marginal in terms of a delta. I think he might have just clawed it back on the exit. Castorino going for provisional pole, take it back, and he does by 75 thousandths of a second and 6 tenths of a second clear of anybody else. Zampedri's going to try to close up that margin a little bit. So is Nicholas Houben. He's found 4 tenths of a second on his lap, and that could be very, very big for the German driver, who's trying to see if he can change that P2 in the championship up to P1 in this final round. P1 for the race might be a little bit tricky, but there are still plenty of opportunities with 90 minutes of racing, and he is maintaining a very good delta towards the end of this lap. Zampedri, he's lost a little bit of time, though, relative to his previous best. Final laps for his drivers will be coming up fairly shortly, and I don't think for Zampedri it's going to be an improvement. It's not. Let's keep an eye on this man, though. He rounds out through the final corner. Go on board as that V8 under the bonnet absolutely roars into life. It's a big time from the German driver, and he slots in right behind his teammate in towards P3. Still 4 tenths of a second adrift from those lead couple of McLarens, but crucially, Houben right now is P3, Kareckas starting P8, and Kareckas, if they were to finish like they are lined up on the grid right now, Houben would take the championship by 6 points. So, of course, this is qualifying. These positions right now count for nothing other than where they will start this race from. And we still even have a couple of minutes left to go for these to all chop and change, because the likes of Zampedri may be about to spoil Houben's day just a little bit, because he's going very quickly. Although it was a little bit wider on the exit of the second Lesmo than he perhaps would have wanted. And in actual fact, lost a little bit of time down towards the Ascari chicane as a result. See Jardier in the background there. Florian Duacot for Unicorns of Love as well. 3 tenths up on his time. That would very likely put the BMW again between his teammates and Kareckas, and that is exactly not what Kareckas is going to be wanting. And there you go, P6 right now for Florian Duacot. And Kareckas is barely improving. Duakop, no further improvements in this session from him then. Zampedri rounding out what may be his penultimate lap. If he's got the fuel on board the car, it looks like he'll be good enough to get in towards the top 3, and it is by 29 hundredths of a second. He manages to get himself up in towards that top 3 again to make it McLaren's 1, 2, and 3. But Kareckas right now with his teammates even improving as well. Down towards P10. He needs a mighty lap. Nicholas Houben, no further improvements from him, so he will start no higher than P4. And Hutchinson, who has managed to start a lap before the end of his session, has found a little bit of time in the opening part of the lap. No Reader has abandoned his. Marco Bischoff is on a lap. The man that finished P2 last time out. It's going to be difficult for him to go one better this time around. Of course, 2-time Pro Series champion. 3/10 up on his lap. And again, if Kareckas doesn't improve, he's finding a little bit of difficulty in trying to gain some pace, and he may not even be the lead of his Veloce Yes Heat lineup at this rate. Of course, he may recover some of those positions in the race. We'll have to wait and see. Bastian Richter's also pushing on very heavily, seeing if he can get himself onto pole position. But again, these are crucial, crucial moments. Marco Bischoff for the K. Kramer Racing Esports team. Will he get himself ahead of Grantis Kareckas? It's going to be pretty close. I think Kareckas might just about start ahead of the German driver. We get a faceful offence on the way by. And Bischoff only good enough to slot in towards P12. And I think as far as those that may be influencing our starting positions of our championship rivals, that is likely going to be a big improvement for Michael Frey. 0.4 of a second. In actual fact, he's very much going to be up just outside of a top 10. Slotting in does exactly the same time as Kareckas. So maybe eat my words there for a moment. As Michael Frey, not wanting to be counted out whatsoever, puts in a very good final lap to get himself up the order. But by the looks of it, right now, Nicholas Houben starting in P10. Nicholas Houben starting in P4 in the number 4 car, and Grantis Kareckas starting in P10. And again, that is exactly the lineup that they would need for Houben to become champion if they were to finish as they will start today's race. So we have all of the premise for things to really kick off, but with 90 minutes of action, we've got to get through lap 1 as well. It's very much not over and done with just yet. Eric Conrad looking to improve. He does, and he makes his way up the order just a little bit. And we shall head over and look at some results in just a moment for our starting grid and see exactly how things are going to be playing out for this evening. But my goodness, what a fantastic qualifying session. How strong is that McLaren? Is absolutely mighty by the looks of it. May end up suffering a little bit of a BOP change. We know how these things can go. It hasn't been in the game for very long, and we could very much end up seeing a little bit of a chop and change around for that car as we make our way into Season 11. But right now, it's all about this evening. It's all about the grand finale of Season 10 here at Monza. We will have a look through our starting order in just a second once I have this overlay up and running. But Castorino, fantastic debut to the series. It's going to be hard push with the likes of Richter and Zampedri in those other 2 McLarens that will be lining up behind him. And of course, Richter, you know, he maybe won't go for the victory. His objective, perhaps, is not overall pace, but is to help his teammate. So, Amadeo Castorino in the number 19 car starts on the front row of the grid and starts on pole position alongside this man, Bastian Richter, who makes up the second space on the grid. And then the third of, I believe, our 3 McLarens in the field, Matteo Zampedri. So 2 Italians at their home circuit inside the top 3. So I'm sure that'll be getting a nice reaction. Then one of your championship protagonists, Nicholas Houben, starts P4 in the number 4 car with Jade Hutchinson, the Canadian, starting P5 in the number 5. Next of the Unicorns of Love roster, and could be another driver to have very significant influence on this championship, Florian Duakop starts in P6. Walsingham, last week's race winner, starts in P7 with continuing newcomer to the championship and demonstrator that he has fantastic pace across multiple platforms. Of course, Moritz Lerner And the number 13 car starts in P8. Jardia then starts ahead of your championship leader, Kareckas. A difficult qualifying session from him. He is there or thereabouts with the leading pace of the Porsches, but not quite where we're used to seeing him. Usually he's able to find that extra tenth, maybe even 2 tenths over some of those around him. In actual fact, Jardia being the lead of that bunch today. Michael Frey starting P11 with Valentine Barrier, the next of the Yas Heat cars, starting in P12. So work to be done if they want to bring themselves into contention and be a bit of a rear gunner for their teammate in the sister team. Marco Bischoff starts P13 with Soltov in P14, and Igor Simonov for the Motorsharks esports team rounds out the top 15. Noah Eder, next of the K. Kramer Racing esports cars, starts in P16, where we then have Oliver Martins in the BMW, who will start in 17th place ahead of another one of the BMWs. I think we actually have a little bit of a cluster here with Nico Pennon in the number 15 car, starting in P18. Good pace from Nico. Has sometimes ended up being down towards the tail end of the top 30, so great to see him inside the top 20 for this. Eric Conrad and the last of that BMW trio starts in 19th, with Sasha Vassner rounding out the top 20, with Philip Gross in 21st position in the next of our Lamborghinis. Jan Drexler starts in 22nd place, and then Sven Paul in 23rd place just behind him. I think those two may be teammates. I'm not 100% certain though. Could be very similar liveries. Lucas Schneckenberger in a very distinctive, very nice looking livery for Spaghetti Racing starts in 24th in the number 24. Manuel Fuchs starts in 25th position, with Jonathan Clifford in what I think could be one of the last, if not the last, of the Lamborghinis. And then we have Kay Zeisler in the number 25 Porsche, starts in 27th place. Sammy Ratz in the number 27 Ferrari starts in 28th. And then last but not least, Sammy Fock rounds out your grid in 29th position. And that potentially is a driver that we maybe would have expected to be just a little bit further up the order than I'm sure that he would have been hoping for. And, you know, especially the likes of his teammates as well, who would have been wanting to try to get every single advantage that he can possibly get from this race. We'll get the final bits and pieces sorted out for our overlay as our drivers then make their way on the formation lap around this 5.8 kilometer circuit and look to try to get their final bits of preparation. You see we're going to be racing into the night, and lights already ablaze in these conditions. Of course, it makes it a little bit trickier on occasion to get that car dialed in and consistent when you're driving these conditions, because of course you just fundamentally you have less visibility. And of course, when you're on the opening lap, you need as much awareness around you as possible. Now, that's something that applies to any of the races that we have in LFM, but fundamentally any bits of sim racing and real racing all round. But it becomes ever more crucial when you are at a circuit like this, where things are renowned for being somewhat dramatic, shall we say, on the opening lap. And also that first chicane, it just inherently it causes the cars to bunch, it causes the cars stop in the apex. If you are approaching that corner from P30 and you try to brake where you were braking qualify or even just the race, I can guarantee you that the stewards are not going to be very happy, and you will probably end up with a very, very long list of very eloquently explained complaints and reasons as to why you should never do that again. So our drivers, hopefully, fingers crossed, will be able to avoid that, as that would be certainly a dramatic way to kick off this final round. But big stories, like I say, in terms of the championship, with Houben starting in P4, his teammates sandwiching him right now for Unicorns of Love. Meanwhile, Kareckas, second best out of the Yas Heat drivers, and right now with a little bit more work to do than perhaps he would have been imagining at this stage. So very interesting to see how that plays out for him. Of course, remember, we have quite a tight fight as well for P3 in the standings. Marco Bischoff has managed to quite nicely solidify himself into position in that one. But the likes of Walsingham, Jardier as well, sort of just lurking around. Jardier may be a bit tricky for him, but Walsingham certainly, if he gets a very good result, as Bischoff walks away with quite a poor one, could find his way back into P3 in the championship, especially after putting in such a good effort last time out for round 11. So, drivers bunching together then, as see some very dramatic weaving from Sasha Vassner at the tail end of the grid. It all comes down to this. After 11 weeks of racing, we enter the final round here at the Temple of Speed. Grancis Kareckas versus Niklas Houben. They're not the pointy end of the grid exactly per se, as in the way that we're used to seeing, but have no doubt they'll be there, and they have a lot on the line to be fighting with. So for 90 minutes of racing then, Castorino will lead them towards the chicane as we wait for the lights to go green. They all try to get that perfect extreme start, and there we go, and away, and it's a pretty even start at the front of the field, a little bit closer bunch so with the likes of Maurice Lerner, everyone going towards that inside line, trying to make sure they are not overtaken on the entry, swapping of positions there with Zampage trying to go down the inside. Richter sent towards the outside, lights ablaze, towards turn one they go. Houben sent towards the outside line, he's made it through there safely. What about Kareckas? He's getting a little bit bogged down in the mid-pack then, but very much bunched as they were previously. But crucially, Kareckas not losing or gaining any positions. But you can see absolute madness right now with the likes of Walsingham, Duacop, Jardier and Kareckas all battling for position on the run down towards second chicane. Houben defending from Hutchinson further up in front. Jardier trying to make a move. Oh, and a little bit of contact into the rear of the number one car. Not enough to upset it completely, but that may not be helping Kareckas whatsoever. You see Bischoff darting and diving left and right as he tries to make a position. Kareckas now towards the inside of his teammate. How hard will Jardier be fighting this one? Remember, they're not quite on the same team, but he may give a little bit of room, and eventually he does concede a position. So Kareckas up towards P9, and that would be just enough right now to consolidate his championship. Meanwhile, getting very busy because another one of the Yassit cars, Valentin Barron now trying to go towards the outside of his teammate Jardier towards the Ascari chicane. No love lost between the pair of them, but if they want to keep themselves in the fight to try to help out Kareckas, they need to be there or thereabouts. And they do manage to keep it all together, as now Hutchinson coming under a huge amount of pressure. Excuse me, it's Hutchinson trying to make the move over Lerner, who I think may have got the job done earlier on in the lap, not quite able to swap around. But crucially, Maurice Lerner can see a second behind Niklas Houben, who himself is a second behind the likes of Zampedri, Richter and Castorino in those three McLarens at the front of the field, as Hutchinson absolutely locked into the slipstream towards turn one. Will he go for a dive at the end of the very first lap? He goes towards the outside. Walsingham looking up the inside, but in the end they will stay as they were. Not the same story though. Further down the order, we've got Martin side by side with Frey trying to go around the outside. Is the BMW difficult car to make that move? Stick around here, nicely driven between those two cars. You can see the traction, the acceleration is in favour of the Porsche, and the BMW is even going to be hung out to dry a little bit on the outside there. But that BMW, will it start to come back in straight line speed? I can see swapping of positions right behind. There's only so many places I can look at once, and Martins is going to concede that one. What about Simonov versus Penman, though? A little bit of contact on the entry, and it's got very awkward there. And that's Noah Reeder for K. Kramer Racing Esports, who got an excellent run and then got bonked backwards and then got bonked forward straight into the inside of the turn. Now it's kicking off once more. Soldatov has managed to get through in all of that. Explosion of Doom, I think, has just kicked off an ACC, so apologies if that just absolutely ruined everyone's eardrums. I know it certainly did mine, but Soldatov, no time to waste. We've immediately got continuing battles towards the Ascari chicane now. Soldatov trying to see if he can hold that outside line. Martins can't get to the inside, and that will compromise his run somewhat through the Ascari chicane. So smart defending now from the number 7 car. He makes himself up into P14. Up at the front of the field, though, Castorino already starting to put significant ground over the likes of Richter and Zampedri in those McLarens. Houben staying within touching distance and driving fairly well at the moment. See if he can maybe sneak up onto the podium. We'll have to wait and see about that one. As also Kareckas is very much hunting for positions still, but he has Florian Duakop in front of him, and that's one of the few cars on this grid that are likely to be making his life very difficult indeed. Unfortunately, we don't have iRacing. We do have R Factor 2. We'll come back to that a bit later on in this stream, because we've got some things kicking off further down the order as well. Philip Gross is up and down like a yo-yo at the moment. I think he skipped the chicane. So that was what happened there. Meanwhile, granted, Kareckas, crucial moves right now, but he knows if he gets it wrong and drops down the order, that could be championship done with. So he can't afford to do anything too stupid too soon, but he may have 90 minutes to work with, as that's contact, and that's big impact almost into a wall. Somehow a 360 Moshark's esports car of Simonov take a bow, manages to keep it just about together. Meanwhile, side-by-side action between Sven Bohr and Manuel Fuchs in the Porsche, as Simonov rejoins just in the background there. You can see also, I think it's Samuel Ratz versus Jonathan Clifford getting very cozy, as that's a Mercedes that's just been fired off in towards the inside of the wall. That was Schneckenberg. Oh, I thought that was going to be contact there between the BMW and the Porsche towards the outside. Sven goes. I don't think he's going to be able to get a move done on this occasion. Simonov getting one recovered over that Mercedes of Schneckenberg, that seems to be having a little bit of a tough time at the end of this lap. And absolutely look at that train of cars. They're a little bit broken up into bunches, but I tell you what, they are absolutely nose to tail to get to the point where Philip Gross has had a very busy time over the last lap. Also, side-by-side on the exit now, as Philip's taken the place. So has Sasha Vassner in that number 8 Mercedes. Will go on board, though, with Eric Conrad. No, he won't, because now we can't see the Mercedes. The BMW looks like it's got a pretty good run. He's also getting the slipstream off the Lamborghini. That's smart placement from Philip Gross as well, because he wants these two to scrap and then allow him to gain a little bit of time. You see, got the move back done. I'll tell you what, though, Sasha Vassner, fantastic on the brakes, manages to get himself back around. That was fantastic. That was like Verstappen versus Ocon in Formula 3 at the top end of the Kemmel-Straight Spa-Francorchamps. Positions reversed and under braking, swapping around once more. Incredible stuff. Schneckenberger once again applying the pressure now to Samuel Fock. Well, I think there may be a little bit of damage on board that Mercedes. I'm not quite sure, as Samuel Ratz looking someone up the inside may have got that one done. It had a little kick of the gravel. Meanwhile, it's Jan Drexler making up a move over Eric Conrad, so I think that may be what happened there, losing a bit of momentum for the Yeet Esports car, much like the likes of Samuel Fock, who goes out wide. It's not over and done with just yet, though, as him and Schneckenberger, as the cameras take quite a while to get themselves across, as it's now the Ferrari losing out at least at one position. Samir trying to stay in touch with Schneckenberger as all of the lights go flashing on by. Look at that towards the Scari chicane. Trying to get on the inside was the Lamborghini, I think, of Clifford. Samir trying to defend from Simonov, who won't be very happy with how things played out in the opening lap. You can see clouds of gravel on the exit there. But meanwhile, at the front of the field, Castorino has checked out. Fast lap of the race, though, last time around, equaling the fastest lap from Castorino, as Moritz Lerner, as Nicholas Houben has had a terrible exit out of Parabolica and now finds himself in grave danger of maybe even losing 2 positions. Moritz Lerner for Mouse Esports has made his way up into P4, and Nicholas Houben now, he needs desperately to try to recover these positions, because Kareckas is absolutely glued to the back of his teammates in the scrap for P9. He's got Jardier just behind. I think Eric Conrad may have gone off as well. I think he skipped that first chicane. Flashing of the lights there from Nicholas Houben. I'm not sure, maybe there was something he wasn't too happy about. We'll have to see if there's any stewards inquiries that plays into this. But right now, that's made it that bit more difficult for Houben to be in with a chance of a podium, especially with the likes of Zampedri, Castorino and Richter going oh so quick at the front end of the pack. Was definitely still within touching distance, of course, is this group. And speaking of groups, look at this. Francis Kareckas is at the lead of one right now, because we have Florian Duakop in the BMW, which has very good straight line speed. White flag for Houben. Oh, I got concerned there for a second that there was going to be a slow-moving vehicle through the Ascari chicane, but thankfully no harm is done. As now Duakop, Kareckas, Jardier, Valentine, Bischoff, all absolutely line astern as Drexler goes wide in the background, and it all gets very busy. Somehow, though, it's actually Manuel Fuchs ends up losing out a chunk of time. I think he may have had a visit to the gravel in all of that. Philip Gross versus Oliver Martins. It's the Lamborghini that comes out on top, as well as now Kareckas has got a run. And he is making up crucial and important moves in this race, but not quite, because that BMW is quick in a straight line and he needs to defend for his teammate. Surely he goes towards the inside line. He's trying to cover off. Kareckas getting very bunched on the entry towards that braking zone. Little bit of tapping between Jardier and Kareckas. There'll be heart-in-mouth moments for both drivers on that. You don't be responsible for pushing around your teammate or dislocating their finger. We'll skip over that, head back to Spa if you want to know more. But Sasha Vassner also under pressure from Oliver Martins in the battle for P17, but can't quite do anything just yet. Florian Durkop fighting for his life, and Kareckas almost into the gravel. Into the gravel, and Jardier goes past. Valentine goes past. This is the way. This is what I said. He has to be so careful because there is so much more on the line for Grantis Kareckas. He's almost getting sent around by Bischoff there as they were side by side through two Lesbos. Bear in mind, Bischoff, he's fighting for P3 in the championship, and Walsingham is up in P7, so he wants every position he can get. And Michael Frey, well, he hasn't quite often seen this point of the grid, so he is just having a wonderful time, and he's going to be sending it left, right and centre, and no doubt white flag for Walsingham. Doesn't seem to have too much of an issue there by the looks of it. Houben immediately back on the tail of Maurice Lerner. So is Zampedri on the back of his teammate Bastian Richter towards the outside of Parabolica. He now looks, that's tricky. Castorino leading by 2.5 seconds. Two McLaren side by side through the final turn. Sasha Vassner, yellow flag for him as he drops down the order, and I can only keep an eye on so many things. Bastian Richter still managing to keep Zampedri behind, almost contact between two of them as they head down the back straight. Meanwhile, this gaggle of cars as Houben under pressure from Jade Hutchinson. But I'll tell you what, Hutchinson, he's being very smart. He is just pushing along that Mercedes. Zampedri, though, trying to push towards the outside of Bastian Richter in that Unicorns McLaren, excuse me, and a little bit into the gravel. And I'm sure that there will be words said about that, I have no doubt, as Marco Bischoff has managed to get in front of Kareckas. So disaster for the Lithuanian, who was looking to try to get himself some extra positions and seeing if he can get himself towards a safe point in this grid to cement that championship in this final round. Now finds himself in a very, very scary place, as so does Hutchinson versus Houben, because what has happened there? Houben now trying to fend off Walsingham from two championship protagonists. The last couple of laps have been very, very scary for each of these cars, and Walsingham, again, like I say, he is trying to get P3 in this championship. He needs every point he can get if he's going to make it happen. A dead look at a replay, because every time something happens just moments later. So your running order right now: Castorino, Richter, Lerner, your top three, as Matthias Zampedri's dropped down to P5. So we missed how that came about after. Bear in mind, Richter ends up being the one that actually lost out a little bit in that scrap. Castorino's having a wonderful time, 5.5 seconds clear of the rest of this field. But I'll tell you what, right now, after that mistake, issue, something or other, is Nicholas Houben right now trying to recover positions back up into the top 5. But he's got that very fast McLaren of Zampedri in front of him. And the Lamborghinis as well, looking pretty good in race trim. And you see, Mercedes not looking like it's got a great deal of straight line speed, and that could be an issue, because here comes Aidan Walsingham, and which way does he look to go? And he is looking towards the inside line, and Houben is not defending now. Is that very, very tactical, trying to keep himself in this fight, although they're level in towards the apex. Zampedri almost forced onto the ground, getting a taste of his own medicine almost from Hutchinson there, as they're both side by side as they head through Curva Grande. Kareckas and Soldatov now battling, and it's Soldatov that's got in front. Kareckas fighting back. There's nowhere that I can keep an eye on every single one of these battles. Fempor and Simonov battling as well. Looking left, looking right is Nicholas Houben, but he can't find a way through. And now he drops down to P7 in all of this, with Walsingham getting himself up into P6. Hutchinson staying P5 and Zampedri in P4. Checking in on Grantas Kareckas. He's down in P12, and I'm not even convinced that the predictions that we have for this race went down this low. And that means terrible, because that means I have to do maths, which amongst all this chaos is going to be an extremely interesting task, but I should do my best to keep you in the loop, unless there are some very, very helpful people in the chat that want to do some calculations for me at the moment. Meanwhile, contacts, that is Fempor that's been sent off into the gravel side by side on the exit of the first Lesmo alongside. I didn't quite catch who it was, but number 26 car has got going again, but has dropped all the way down to 28th place. And that is not where he would have wanted to be. Meanwhile, checking in. Further up the order, Marco Bischoff gaining in the slipstream over Valentine Barrier in this fight for the top 10. Because with Walsingham in P6 and that train of Hutchinson, well, Zampedri, Hutchinson, Walsingham, Houben, these positions can move around very, very quickly. Much like this one for P8 then, because Jardier trying to see if he can make his way through over that BMW Florian Durkop, who's got a good amount of straight line speed in that car. But Jardier, he's confident on the brakes, and he gets it stopped very nicely. No resistance in the end provided by Florian Durkop. In actual fact, I wonder, will he even drop back into that little gaggle of cars just behind and try to see if Kareckas will end up falling down the order anymore? We'll have to see about that. We're only 15 minutes into this race, and it's been absolute chaos start to finish. No signs of rain as of yet, and possibly a relief to the drivers, because it's been chaotic enough so far without having to deal with some changeable conditions amongst all of that as well. See, Moritz Lerner, who has got some very good race pace in that Lamborghini, it must be said, 47.207. I tell you what though, Castorino in a league of his own, 46.5 last time round. He is absolutely flying. That was fastest lap of the race as well from the Italian driver, so he is absolutely flying at the front of this pack, but is definitely all still to play for the remaining podium positions and those all in crucial positions inside of the top 10, or even just outside of the top 10, with the likes of Kareckas right now sitting in P12. Did manage to fend off Solsov. It was looking dicey for a moment. Florian Durkop trying to use that BMW straight line speed to go towards the outside of Jardier in towards Parabolica, then can't make that one work. Let's see, let's go on board hopefully the front splitter, if we can find it. We'll get it eventually. There it is for Florian Durkop, but look at the straight line speed of this car. We'll go back to that's not what I wanted, as everything is chopping and changing around. We'll go back to normal views there, because Florian Durkop in the BMW, he has got the advantage in towards turn 1. Jardier though fighting it on the inside line. He turns into the outside. He's got the acceleration out of the corner. Of course, that Porsche Flat 6 mighty in terms of the way it gets the power down. And the BMW absolutely glued to the rear, drifting out towards the left-hand side of the circuit. He has to, as Florian Durkop takes that shorter run. Has he even got the move done down into towards second chicane? Jardier very late on the brakes, and can he get it stopped in time? And he does. So Jardier then holds on to P8, Durkop P9, Barrier P10, Bischoff P11, and Kareckas P12. As it stands, Michael Frey was getting very close to the back of Soldatov, although not to worry too much, because Soldatov very deep, and the brakes almost a late move, with Pendleton trying to get up the inside, and there's further contact. Soldatov around, contact again on the exit of the corner, and there's a Lamborghini in there. That's Philip Gross says, thank you very much, I'll have the freebie, and a possible penalty on the way, I would imagine, for Nico Pendleton. They'll have to see how the stewards rule it, so he may even get another one for free in all of that as well. Speaking of stewards' inquiries, have we got any penalties as of yet? No. We have lots of no further actions, but nothing that has warranted the penalties to come down with their punishment capabilities and takes them away from these drivers. Valentine, as he's sending one up the inside of Florian Durkop. That BMW may be losing a bit of performance now as those tyres begin to wear, but he surely will be back on the attack in just a moment. So is the scrap between Oliver Martins and Eric Conrad for P16, showing once again, doesn't matter whereabouts in the field you are, you will have some incredible racing. We'll keep on an eye on each of these systematically then. Durkop versus Barrier. Barrier trying to defend in the same way exactly that his teammate did. Goes a little bit deeper in that first run. Bischoff trying to sneak one up the inside of Durkop then. Can't get it done. What about, though, Conrad versus Martin side by side, the two BMWs with the likes of Schneckenberger watching in pursuit. You can see a little bit of contact in that part of the lap on the run down towards second chicane again. These two getting stuck to each other. Oh, what a big, bold move there from Martins in the BMW to go defensive on the run towards that second chicane. Not quite sure that was necessary. In actual fact, breaks a little bit deep in towards the second chicane. Of course, slightly blind from the car in front. Quite often, you will see drivers actually just lifting off just a little bit, try and give themselves that extra bit of wiggle room, and also see if they can refine the placement of their car towards the apex a little bit better over their opponents. Solstov and Manuel Fuchs battling very hard through the two Lesbos. Then it will be the Porsche comes out on top for now. Will it be the same story for the scrap for P11? Not with corrections and exits like that. And I tell you what, Kareckas may now actually have something to say about it, and he does, because Bischoff having to go defensive, I think, and will go on board with Michael Frey as he watches all of this unfold in front of him. Kareckas unable to get anything done through that initial part of Parabolica then, but he's got a very good run, he's got a very good exit. But of course, Florian Durkop, surely he'll give the slipstream over to the K Kramer Racing Esports Porsche, and he does, and that allows Bischoff to escape for just a moment. Triple toe effect almost for Michael Frey here. Bischoff down towards the inside, trying to defend, holding off the Lithuanian on the outside, but he's brave on the brakes towards the inside. He gets towards turn 2. Bischoff, he's got the run, and he does stay in towards P11, and it's all the meanwhile allowing Michael Frey to come more into the picture and seeing if the Swiss driver can do anything about it towards the inside line. Oh, that is very close between those two. Kareckas, he has so much to lose right now. Bischoff a little bit less so. Contact between the two. We'll have to see how that plays out. Bischoff is going to retain the place for the time being. That was a difficult one to judge. That may also go to no further action, because this is extremely hard racing in the grand finale, and we are only barely 20 minutes in to this race, so expect all the fireworks to still be kicking off all the way to the very end of this one. And Michael Frey, we stick on board with him as he applies the pressure to that K Chrome Racing Esports car, that just showing his nose a little bit towards that inside line. Can't do anything just yet, but enough in order to able to sustain that pressure, although a little bit of an awkward line through the Ascari chicane, and as a result will drop back. And will that give Marco Bischoff the breathing room that he needs? Of course, the Porsche not the strongest in a straight line, as also crucially Niklas Houben is back within a few tenths of Aidan Walsingham, so he has not given up on that position by any stretch of the imagination. Kareckas unable to do anything for the time being, so will stay in P12. Simonov in the number 22 Ferrari, trying to see if he can do anything about Oliver Martins in the BMW. Side by side then they go towards turn 1, trying to see how late on the brakes he can go. The answer's very, and there's the prototype late nature that I was talking about with that 296. Gets on the power, no questions asked, and he gets himself up into P18. Fantastic from the number 22 car. So, Niklas Houben then. Let's try to do, whilst we have a very brief lull, I don't expect it to be that long in the grand scheme of things, let's do some maths and try to work out exactly where things would stand if they were to finish as they were. So, Kareckas leads on 13,012 points at the moment, with the likes of Niklas Houben on 12,932. I can't type, so this has gone terribly. There we go. So that means there is exactly 80 points between them. That is very, very small in that there is no doubt about that whatsoever. Let's see, can I then grab from somewhere what the point scoring situation is actually going to be for these guys, because we have a fixed point system in here now. It's not the way that things used to be. We used to have it where your the number of points that you score was proportional in some form or another over to your elo. This is now fixed in this championship. Schneckenberger's gone very wide at Parabolica. Not quite sure what may have ended up causing that, but one way or another, he is locked into the slipstream. Advancing barrier, I think, has had to skip the first chicane as he is rocketed up and down the order very, very quickly. In actual fact, given a position to Jadier in the process, and I think it's going to be a similar story with Schneckenberger, who gets a very poor exit out turn 2 after rather wobbling his way through those initial series of curves. Meanwhile, Sven Paul and Kay Ziegler trying to see what they can do in the fight for 25th position. 3.2 seconds to the Lamborghini of Jonathan Clifford up in front, and seeing if he can get himself into a better points finishing spot. Of course, points do stack up, of course, the entirety of the season, so they are all very much relevant round to round. Sasha Fassner immediately in the frame to try and make a move, but can't do one just yet. Meanwhile, closest fight on circuit. Well, there's a few to choose from between the likes of Houben versus Walsingham, Bischoff and Kareckas versus Florian Duakop, and then Simonov onto the back of this train of cars. So very much a tricky field for these drivers to negotiate this evening, and making progress through it is even harder with all of that. So you can see Ada Walsingham maybe about to find out the hard way from the Ferrari driver. Let's see, does he decide to go to that inside line? And the answer is no. He is saving some tyres perhaps, and also saving some fuel, and of course just driving a lot quicker overall because he's able to get into that slipstream, and that is going to pull his car along. Hopefully he remembers that when he next approaches the braking zone, but I'm sure it's man as talented as him makes those kind of mistakes very, very rarely. Meanwhile, further down the order, Philip Gross and Nico Pennon into Lamborghini, and the BMW Schneckenberger. He's and it's down turn 1. It's not for the first time that has taken place. I do need to try to quickly check if I can between what's going on up and down the order, but we're going to gamble on it, everybody. Let's try to see if we can go for a replay over the instant for Lukas Schneckenberger, who was running a good few positions higher up than this. Is he going to get sent around over the apex when they get towards turn 1? And the answer is no, it's a tap and a punt from behind. I didn't quite catch who was responsible for that one, but I know that at least Schneckenberger is not likely to be best pleased with whoever that was, unfortunately. But these things do happen. Schneckenberger has lost another position, unfortunately, to the likes of Manuel Fuchs, who has got through. In actual fact, though, he has swapped back again. So Manuel Fuchs is putting on under a lot of pressure. Now Jonathan Ratz. Oh my goodness. Jonathan Clifford trying to defend from Samuel Ratz in the scrap for 23rd position. Lamborghini doing a good enough job so far to hold back the Lithuanian driver, but those gaps do keep on bouncing around somewhat. Moritz Lerner scared me for a second, bring out the white flag. It does look like everything is okay there. And Houben again just feeling happy to hold back and maybe take these tyres a little bit longer in this race and see if he can get the job done in the second phase. Who knows? Nico Pennon is in P15 in the number 15 car, applying the pressure to the back of Philip Gross in the Lamborghini that is just in front. And gaps between all of our drivers, in fact, whilst at times very, very small, there is no doubt about it, that they are certainly looking very marginal back and forth, but somewhat remotely calmer than what we had previously going. Zampedri has managed to get himself back up in towards the top 3. So after that mistake, something that happened previously, he had a relatively competitive lap last time round, so I'm assuming it may have been this lap that was compromised, and he ended up doing a 46.9 on the last lap whilst he was hunting down Moritz Lerner, who ended up going down to a 48.1. So Not very good for the man that has recently moved over from ACC. Meanwhile, 7.5 second lead for Castorino at the pointy end of this field. It is now back to Porsches at 1, 2, and 3, followed by the likes of Hutchinson in the Lamborghini, Moritz Lerner, of course, in 1 as well. And then we have Walsingham in the 296, and then the likes of Jardier in the next of the Porsches, currently down in P8. Granted, Kareckas, again, looking to make a move over Marco Bischoff. This could very well end up being for the championship. Of course, whilst these two may not be fighting outright in terms of those top points in the standings, that very much Bischoff is looking to try to get as high the order as he can so that he can get P3, because there's still some stuff very nicely up for grabs indeed. Jan Drexler versus Oliver Martins towards turn 1 as well, and it's the German driver that comes out on top here. That one's Kareckas, continues to be in pursuit. Getting a little bit of word from pit control there, and Moritz Lerner is actually trying to save fuel for maybe fueling the car just a little bit too little. So not what you want in the middle of a sim race to discover that one. But if he does pit on the earlier side of things, he can get fueled up again to have maybe a bit of a more comfortable journey towards the end of this race. But right now, all these drivers absolutely in the thick of it. Adrenaline and blood pressure will be dialed up to 11 at the moment for these drivers as they try to keep their heads on a level playing field. As Florian Duicop, he makes a mistake and it could be a crucial one. The main thing is for him to keep Grantas Kareckas behind, but ideally he wants to finish up ahead of these drivers as he was battling amongst them. And in the end, Kareckas can't quite do it just yet. How much of a good run is Houben going to have from Marco Bischoff? Are they going to have the wrong photo? Very disappointing. There we go. So, Florian Duicop in that Unicorns of Love BMW. Often you saying the Mercedes, not quite for this evening. Trying to see if he can go for a move. Let's be careful. Oh, and he does go for a late move. He peels off the brakes at the very end, and that's Marco Bischoff sent in towards the AstroTurf. This is not the likes of what Kareckas is wanting you, sent towards the outside line, and that is a tricky scenario for these drivers to attempt to get through. I'm sure, again, there will be conversations and words being had after this race. But crucially, in terms of the championship, Kareckas now towards the outside line. He's trying to make it stick. He's made it stick awfully well. Absolutely gorgeous move from from Grantas Kareckas over Florian Duicop to get himself up into P11 then. As well, Michael Frey was also able to set one up and open up a little bit of an advantage. And interestingly, a little bit of a sort of a bit of insight for what some of these drivers end up kind of dealing with. The wonderful minions in the chat who very much are involved in also in a lot of the running of this championship, as Moritz Lerner brings out the white flag. Gap open up to Zampedri to 2.5 seconds. So I think that's a moment across the gravel for the German driver. That between all of the members at LFM and of course our stewards for this evening, your other broadcast being hosted in other languages, is a monumental effort that goes in to bringing this all together and also giving you all of the action that we have been treated to all season long. So not too long until the pit window. Just a couple of minutes, and will we see the likes of Kareckas trying to get himself out of these scraps, or will he end up going long in this race? Florian still under increasing pressure from the man behind of Manuel Fuchs, very close between him on the exit of turn 4. Excuse me, that's the run towards turn 4 as they go through Curva Grande then. As the Porsche trying to see if he can get towards the back of that BMW. He can't, is the simple answer. Meanwhile, though, Steckenberger and the Porsche of Manuel Fuchs having a scrap of their own. as is Oliver Martins and Soldatov. So very small margins between each of these drivers. Defending that inside line is Schneckenberger. Whereabouts does Manuel Fuchs in his Porsche decide to go? And in the end, he decides to just keep it a little bit more patient, try to see if he can sneak a run up towards the Lesmo. Need a bit more of an overlap than that if you're going to make it work. But a battle that I'm sure, I have no doubt, in fact, will continue to push on very shortly. Something has happened there. Moritz Lerner, I think the same mistake they ended up making not too long ago, but allowed some of these other cars to get past him, has done the same again. And if he keeps that up, look who's lurking. Just a little bit behind Niklas Houben, following Aidan Walsingham at the moment. Keeping him very much honest. And, of course, he's going to have a... well, he's got a few personalities to get through if he wants to try to win this championship. But right now, if things were to finish as they stand, I do believe that Grantis Kareckas would be the man that ends up taking the crown and the trophy. Just for some rough calculations with some of that. So we'll see how things continue to go in this race. Just comparing fastest lap, still fastest lap of the race was last time around for Castorino. So that car is absolutely immense at looking after its tyres. Well, it looked absolutely planted for this one. And the McLaren has really brought a breath of fresh air. The 720S Evo that has really pulled it into an excellent window. And that's been demonstrated tonight with the McLaren 1, 2 and 3 in that. So keep an eye on how that car progresses over upcoming seasons for the championship. And also just keep an eye on some of those extra little pieces of info further down the order. Something's happening here. What on earth is going on in all this? It's allowed Sven Paul to try to get alongside in towards the first Lesmo, and I think he might end up being able to do it, and he is going to just about. We'll try to catch a replay of that one. Looks like we'll be able to. So towards the second chicane they go. As that is sort of, that is Sven Paul, that is very far back. Is there something that goes wrong here? Oh, look, there it is. So sort of one from another was already around. Sven Paul ended up jumping the chicane in order to try to avoid him because he was reversing onto the circuit at the time. So not much that Sven could do in all of that. But the consequence is Soltov unfortunately drops down to 15th place. Meanwhile, Moritz Lerner, as well predicted by one of those commenting in the chat, had decided to come into the pit right at the beginning of this window. Now, there is trade-offs to all of this. Of course, he is going to be mega fast over the coming laps, and he will be very likely the fastest car out on circuit over the next few laps. The problem with that, though, because it sounds like a pretty free deal, is that, of course, you would be putting extra strain on the system of the car, the overall mechanical side of the car, and you can end up finding yourself in perhaps a slightly better position by the end of qualifying, but, you know, he can end up sort of ramming home the damage a little bit on these cars, and they might be robust enough to take a few physical impacts, but hardware, they don't tend to behave very nicely. So, making sure not to disrupt any of that. 52 minutes then left to go on the clock. And we'll see, will our top 10 start to come into the box? It does look like we have a few, potentially. So Casavino stays out, so does Richter, then Pedri as well. So it's Hutchinson, Walsingham, and Houben in the background of this little group. So it doesn't look like, crucially, because of course we haven't had them in the F1 sessions as they are not something we can employ, but seeing as we get into the closing stages of this race with 52 minutes on the clock, as Marco Bischoff now trying to apply the pressure to Valentin Barrett down the inside. He looks to go in towards turn one. A little bit of contact there over the curves, taking the barrier with as well. Oh dear, it chucks straight into the path of Bischoff. Decides that he can have that one to take with him. Oh, and I think it went under the car for Bischoff. It lost him all the speed as they went in towards Curva Grande. And the Lamborghini is going to have that momentum swing back towards the chicane. And seeing if he can get some sort of form of advantage, he can't. So Bischoff with it all to do in the upcoming laps instead. But yeah, very difficult for Bischoff, and he did a very good job to actually keep it all under control there, because that barrier being sucked underneath the car. Well, he had one barrier to be dealing with. I don't think he exactly expected one to be projected underneath the front of his car, but did manage to cope with it just about in the end. In the meantime, whilst we have been exploring things up and down the rest of the grid, Aiden Walsingham has been closing up to the back of Hutchinson in the scrap for P4. He's got Nicholas Houben just hanging around in the background there, not quite on the same level of pace as the number 5 and number 6 cars in the server, but may be able to take a very valuable opportunity at gaining some positions if he can strike at the right time. No one else choosing to come into the pits. Bischoff, go very wide. I think it's a Parabolica. Does that mean as either of them coming into pits? No, just very different lines on the exit of that final corner as Florian Duakop comes into the pits. Now, that is very interesting. So he'll be looking to try to cover off the likes of Kareckas with an undercut strategy and seeing if he can use that straight line speed advantage, especially in the BMW, to defend later on in this race. So gaps opening up a little bit elsewhere in this grid, so we'll keep an eye on this scrap between Walsingham and Hutchinson for the time being, as well as Bischoff versus Barrier. And suggesting that he clipped the apex, I don't know. It was difficult to tell. It looked like the way that the barrier got sent into the front of his car, but it kind of ended up being dropped underneath. But maybe it was as simple as something on the exit curve. Difficult to tell in all of that, but something got very busy and a little bit Bucking Bronco for the K Kramer Racing Esports car. White flag for Simonov. Didn't see anything particularly alarming down in towards second chicane, but did have that one out for a while, so I'm not sure if maybe there's a reason for him going slowly. As a little bit of an update, penalties wise, we do have a few. Now the question is, will any of these... we get a flag for Duakop. That will be for him coming out of the pits, so nothing to worry on that front. Are these going to influence anything to do with our running order in this race? So, 10-second time penalty for the number 23 car for causing a collision. That car belongs to Oliver Martins down in 26th place. A 5-second penalty for the number 10 car. That belongs to... I wonder if they have retired, because we have lost a couple of cars since the beginning of this session, and I think the number 10 may have been one of them. So that won't make too much difference in the end. 5-second penalty for the number 21 car. That belongs to Eric Conrad in 14th place. Not quite in a position right now to have an impact on our championship fight. 10-second penalty for the number 22. That is for Simonov in P15 at the moment as Jonathan Clipper comes into the pits. 10-second time penalty for the number 14 car. That is Jan Drexler. Another 10-second time penalty for the number 29 car. And that is for Bastian Richter for causing a collision. And we did see Zampedri falling down the order. Now, just looking at that, so 10 seconds... that would be right within the window for Nicholas Houben to gain a position. Now, of course, we don't know if Unicorns of Love or Yassi/Veloce were actually planning on swapping any drivers or in sort of, one way or another. But with that penalty applied, Bastian Richter would very likely emerge just behind his teammate, and who has a very nice margin sitting right now over the likes of Jardier. So he may sit there to the end of the race. Maybe he'll push on, try to see if he can disrupt some of those other cars in front. We'll have to wait and see. But big news for him, and a very, happy time for Castorino, who's still lapping in the 46s. He is anywhere between 4 tenths to 7 tenths of a second faster than anybody else inside of the top 10. Jonathan Clifford coming out of the pits as well. emerging just in front of somebody there. It's one of the other Lamborghinis, but in these nighttime conditions, it's very tricky to be able to tell who that is. I think that actually that is Hutchinson, because there is also Walsingham, as once again Jonathan Clifford getting out of the way for those who are up on other laps. Meanwhile, some of our championship protagonists in towards the pit lane they go, because we have now since had Moritz Lerner into the pits. Florian Duakop in the meantime, he's been putting in some good laps on his undercut strategy. So I have to see whereabouts he comes out. And the likes of Marco Bischoff and Walsingham staying as is. Fast stop for Kareckas. It didn't feel like 30 seconds for the number one car. So whether or not, as I will just check, because they certainly have their mandatory pit stop, and I think in terms of the ruling it still has to be a minimum of a 30-second stop, if I remember rightly. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But one way or another, he has emerged, and he has emerged in relation to Moritz Lerner about 10 seconds behind. So that's sort of a time loss he has had through being involved in battles and other bits of traffic and incidents in the opening stages of this race. Castorino and Richter now into the pits. So is Walsingham, so is Houben. Whilst the likes of Jardier, he is going to come in as well. Valentine, so does he, and Marco Bischoff looked like he was thinking of coming in, but he is actually going to stay out and try to make use of that clean air and see what he can do. Isn't going to be too heavily affected, perhaps, down towards turn one by other traffic. Does have some company a little bit in front of him, but I imagine that will be fairly straightforward to negotiate for the number 2 car. So he continues to stay out, trying to get that grip advantage with the overcut strategy and seeing what he can do. Meanwhile, keeping an eye on Florian Duakop, Grantas Kareckas has emerged crucially in front of that Unicorns of Love BMW. As now yellow flag out for Castorino as he comes out of the pits and looks to carry on in what will be a very comfortable leading position by the time everyone else completes their stops. Having a look as other cars coming out of the pits right now. Let's see whereabouts is everyone going to emerge. And Nicholas Houben has emerged. He has emerged in front of Bastian Richter and Moritz Lerner as well. So those are crucial positions in this race. Now the question is, does Richter, or is he going to swap positions? He is. So Nicholas Houben, I think by the looks of it, is giving the position over to Bastian Richter and is maybe just going to try to go along with him in these next few stages of the race to go in towards that second chicane. And he'll just look to try to run around with his teammates, but they may end up swapping later on in the race. Of course, you know, not just are they teammates, but nice gesture and sporting play there from Houben to Bastian, who is quite clearly a bit of a faster car at the moment. They're only 2 seconds or so adrift of the likes of Walsingham, so still very much to play for some of those positions. But our remaining drivers, by the looks of it, are starting to come into the pits with the likes of Bischoff, Frey, Hutchinson, Zampedri, all deciding to make their stop at just beyond the halfway mark in this race with 42 minutes left on the clock. And Walsingham, that's a lot of gravel, that's a Ascari, and that may be about to put a very straining position on the championship hopes of Grantas Kareckas. We'll get a replay of Walsingham then towards the Ascari, because of course that is an extra position now in favour of Nicholas Houben, but crucially in between Houben. Oh, look at the curb! My goodness, that came out of nowhere, and he's into the wall as well. So in actual fact, the way things may end up playing out could well be the case. So Kareckas does get that position purely because of damage on board that Visceral Esports Ferrari, who ran so well the last time out for round 11. not what he would have wanted there. White flags out, and Visceral Esports Ferrari into the pits as well. So both drivers actually moving up positions in terms of your championship rivals. Then Pedri and Hutchinson brought out a white flag briefly. So did Marco Bischoff, who's emerged just in front of Van Barrier, only a gap of 0.3 of a second. And you see Nicholas Houben sticking with his teammate, who's got Jardier solid 6 seconds behind as it stands. So these two right now just focused on trying to close up now to the likes of Hutchinson, because with Walsingham out of the picture, that makes Bischoff's day a little bit easier as well, because Walsingham's mistake has absolutely cost him his race, with no shadow of a doubt. Whether or not he ends up seeing it through to the end, fingers crossed he will. Is always great if drivers do hang around to the end, but of course sometimes it can be a little bit of a tricky day in the office. It is easier said than done. Jan Drexler making his way into the pits. I think potentially our last driver to pit for this race, as Valentine in that number 9 car, looking very racy on the run towards the final corner, Parabolica, as Drexler starts to drop down the order, of course, having served his pit stop. I see the exit that Porsche 902 is able to get out of the final turn, and so much so to the point where Valentine is really not getting the sort of slipstream benefit that he would have been hoping to be receiving at this point in time, whilst he is gaining not enough to head towards turn 1. You see there's Jardier just up ahead as well of this little squabble. Will we see him drop back and giving a position over to Kareckas the same way as we're kind of expecting Richter to do to Hutchinson? Because Richter hasn't been in this championship all too much. Meanwhile, everything kicking off further down the order. Nico Pennon versus Eric Conrad towards turn 1. It's Pennon down the inside, just about manages to avoid contact there. The overlap was an absolute hair's width again, but they do hold on to it for now. Meanwhile, Drexler just emerges out of the pits ahead of Jonathan Clifford, and so he is in 18th spot. So once again, we have a little moment. We'll check in on some stewards' inquiries as well. Amadeo Castorino for the number 19 car. Absolutely dominant so far this race. Has been looking utterly untouchable and has a 14-second lead over his fellow Italian who is driving another McLaren in this field for team racing points. And Pedri sits in P2. Hutchinson then in P3. Richter followed very closely by his teammate and championship protagonist Nicholas Houben, where they sit 4th and 5th. Morris Lerner P6, Jardier P7, Marco Bischoff P8, Valentine applying the pressure to the K Kramer Racing esports car in P9, and Grantus Kareckas, who is in P10. Of course, another aspect, these drivers, they need to be aware of track limits. If they push track limits a little bit too hard and get a drive through, although it's not the worst pit lane to end up venturing down, it's certainly something you want to avoid. I'll tell you what though, we've got Florian Duerkop, who has been pretty mighty over the last couple of laps, about 0.3 of a second up over the man that is on your screen at the moment, and that would see Kareckas drop to P11. Meanwhile, white flag out for Lerner. I think that again is just ACC having a little bit of a moment as Jan Drexler comes in again into pits. I can only imagine that's for a drive-through penalty. It's a disappointment there for the number 14 car. Should we keep an eye on Florian? As meanwhile, I'm going to try to find some points lists if I can. So we can have a little bit of a look at how it's all going to play out. So, P4 in this championship, P4 in this race would see Nicholas Houben gets 1,296 points. As it stands, if Kareckas was to finish in P10, it would be 1,144 points. That would be a 100 and something points difference between the pair of them, and would see the championship, I do believe, go towards Nicholas Houben. And right now, it's looking that little bit worse because Florian Duakop is fancying a little bit of a poke around the top 10 spots himself and trying to see if he can get that Porsche to drop out of contention. Let's say Houben, he hasn't been the fastest all season. He actually had a no-show as well, remember, for this championship, but he has been exceptionally consistent and once again find himself around the top 5. Meanwhile, though, his teammate trying to do everything that he can towards that opening part of the lap in that chicane. It gets very tricky and busy when you're trying to scrap through there, especially if you go side by side. But the man that has won 4 races so far this season in control of that position for the time being. But towards the latter stages of this race, it could just become that little bit scarier. And I imagine that there might be someone in his ear at the moment giving him the information he needs. And with that gap between himself, the likes of Valentine, who, bear in mind, you know, Valentine, Jardier, they are the part of this sister team to Veloce. So for all we know, we could see Richter gaining a position on the final lap. Richter conceding a position over to Houben on the final lap, and we could see Kareckas gaining 2 positions for all we know. This is why it's crucial that Duakop manages to get himself in front of Kareckas if he wants to help out his teammate, because that might be the difference maker. It could all come down to this scrap for P10 at the moment, and again, that car looking very good in a straight line. And surely if he can get a good run out of Parabolica, that it would be a very good position for the BMW. Pit lane has now closed for the remainder of this race, but no matter, as everybody has completed their pit stops. So, just under 35 minutes of this race left to go, and possibly the championship on the line right now between Kareckas and Florian Duakop as they blast by our cameras towards turn 1. Duakop towards the outside. Kareckas, he's late on the brakes. He needs to be. He has to force the issue as they head through the latter portion of that chicane on the power. It does look like the Porsche is going to maintain that position, and Florian gave it a good go, but may well have to fight once again if that BMW does close up. Now, in terms of the drop rounds, I'll be 100% honest, a little bit confused back and forth in terms of some of these aspects of the standings. So, based on what I understand, drop rounds are still being taken into consideration with all of this. I don't have so much in the way of a quick estimate for how the positions are going to play into effect based on that, but based on references to other positions that we have with the drop scores, right now I do think that difference would just about be enough, but it's tricky to tell at this point in the race, because if Houben does get that free position from Richter, he would sit P4. Kareckas right now sitting in P10, and that is one of my many predictions on the sheet that I do have to work with. So right now, with drop scores taken into account, we're bearing in mind Nicholas Houben, Mr. Consistency, has had 1 no-show. Kareckas, a little bit more up and down, but 4 wins to his name this season. That it would go the way if the positions are swapped in the way that potentially we're anticipating. It would end up going the way of the Unicorns of Love Driver, but we will have to wait and see, and I don't think we're going to have a clear indication until the dying moments of this race at, excuse me, it all kicks off in towards the chicane. I got so surprised by the fact that Florian Duakop was within a tenth of a second of Kareckas. I'm almost choking to death. We'll try to see if we can get a little bit more of a coherent view of what took place there. So Duakop managed to get everything back together, and Duakop towards the outside he went, and trying to force the issue. And will he claim that he was forced out wide there? We'll have to see. Kareckas obviously held onto the position. I'm sure the stewards will be saying something about it. I'm sure that Duakop will be trying to make as much noise as he can about that one. See if he can get something done about that Veloce car. But at least in terms of position right now, that he is still in a position to take this championship in terms of exactly where they align at the moment. But Duacop does look like he has got some really handy race pace that he is executing right now. Nicholas Houben still hanging on to his teammate in P4, but gaps fairly relatively well spread. This is the fight. But he's not only closest on track, but really around the most pivotal. Again, no, that gap before they got towards the final corner was about 0.7 of a second, and then Florian Duacop, oh, it was a big tank slapper. That's how hard he is pushing, and that is going to compromise his chances this time around. That BMW, though, through that middle sector, looks very, very fast, but he's got to be careful not to do something silly like that. Even with that, he was still able to stick well within half a second by the time they got towards the final chicane, excuse me, the first chicane of the lap. So not an opportunity this time around, but it does look like as we are going further into this race, with that BMW in the hands of the German driver just a little bit more competitive than Kareckas, and if he does drop towards P11, that's going to be extremely tricky. And indeed, I agree in the chat that when you've got the likes of Valentin and Jardier and Florian, he's pushing hard, but he's got to be careful not to push too hard. He knows what these positions mean in terms of the championship, and he'll be wanting to do everything that he can to help out his teammate. Even though he's not right there with him, he still has a very important role to play, but he has now given himself a little bit of work to do. But yes, absolutely. You know, right now, both Valentin and Jardier up around P7 and P9 at the moment, and they're a good few seconds up the road. They have to drop a lot of time, and crucially, if they end up dropping time, they're going to lose positions to at least Bischoff. And on top of that, if Duacop is able to get past the likes of Grancis, they will end up dropping positions to him as well. Bear in mind, you know, these guys, they come here to win. They come here to win. They may, eventually accept defeat if they think that they can't win. As Jonathan Clifford brings that yellow flag for a moment. That was on the exit of the first Lesmo by the looks of it, but has got it all back in working order. But it does seem that he has kept it under control, and the positions for the time being, so that those we are interested in, are staying as they are. So, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try to take a bit of a tactical decision in all of this, as I was going to try, because I have a special spreadsheet which I did make, but is unfortunately a little bit out of date in terms of the things that we are interested in knowing. Meanwhile, Sovsov battling with Samuel Ratz towards Parabolica and trying to see if he can get the move done through there. Side by side on the exit they go. BMW versus Ferrari. We know how quick the BMWs have been in a straight line today, and I think that advantage is going to be all he needs to get the position done, unless Samuel Ratz can do something special under braking towards turn one. I'm not sure, but he will be able to, and that will be the position done and dusted. Also, a bit of a stewarding update. So 15-second time penalty for the number 15 car. That belongs to Nico Pennon. Then 10-second time penalty for the number 22. That is in the hands of Simonos. I think that might be a second penalty. And then 15-second time penalty for the number 23 car, and that is Oliver Martins. But other than that, no further investigations have ended up in a penalty being dished out for our drivers. So, as some calculations in the chat as well from Kylo. Thank you very much for those. So if they stay as they are exactly right now, with Houben in P5, Kareckas needs to get up to P8. And that is a big ask. I mean, he does have two drivers in front of him that may give him some positions, and he will need those positions. But the bigger problem that he's got right now is Florian Duacop in that Unicorns of Love BMW, and that is exactly why this is such a difficult position, such a poignant position for Duacop to be in right now. Now, I know that Florian, he's had a little bit of a topsy-turvy time on ACC over the last kind of year and a bit or so, and this was a year, I think, in particular, he was really looking, trying to get his head down and prove himself within that very, very top-level Unicorns of Love lineup. He had a very good outing very recently, I do believe, in another event on ACC, so his confidence is running high right now. What a gift it would be to his team if he was able to pull through and just make it a little bit more difficult for Kareckas to take this championship. We've asked some questions about the prizes, and I shall read those prizes out to you. So, if you are the championship winner of Season 10, you get €2,500 of coupon goodies for Monza Racing products. If you finish in P2, €1,500 of coupon goodies for Next Level Racing, and in P3, €1,000 of worth of coupons for Noble Chairs, and that is all through CaseKing.de, of course, the title sponsor for this championship. And each week, the drivers, or the winners of each race, have had the opportunity to win either a €100 coupon for Glorious Gaming products or a €100 coupon for Ducky, also provided by CaseKing.de. And for this evening, it will be Glorious products. But more importantly, just for time being, here comes Florian Duicot once more. It's a big run for the BMW Kareckas. He's going to have to fight very heavily under braking once more. Florian keeping that inside almost. Contact on the second part of the apex. They just about get away with it. But Kareckas doing everything that he can right now to hold on. And that is going to be very, very tricky. So the penalty, there was a 10-second time penalty for Richter, which he did serve in the pit lane. And that was why he ended up dropping as far back as he did, because he was running in P2. That's a checker curb for the BMW of Florian there. So I do believe in terms of those positions that those are as they are. All penalties for those guys have been sorted and effectively already sent out. Nicholas Houben suddenly found himself very close, in fact, to the back of his teammate, as maybe he looks to line up, getting himself into P4 relatively soon. Meanwhile, though, someone else that is probably the next on the cards to make a potential move, it's not really going to help in terms of the championship so much when we're considering this back and forth with Kareckas versus Nicholas Houben. But Vanzi looking, trying to make a move over Marco Bischoff, which again opens up an interesting point, because if these Yassi drivers are looking to give some positions back to their sort of sister team, Veloce teammate in the former Kareckas, I mean, whilst Vanzi maybe enjoyed the racing in the meantime, maybe he'll look to take a position and then give some back afterwards. That, it's going to be a bit trickier to for both these guys to let through Bischoff as well, and then especially if Florian Duicot does end up getting his way past Grant Kareckas. It is so difficult to predict right now. It's been very clean fights between all of those involved in this championship fight, in this race so far, and I agree, I hope it stays that way to the very end, but it is absolutely going down to the wire, and I think that, this race is sort of, as silly as it sounds, as that's looking interesting. That's actually a bit further down the order. Yellow flag, I can't quite see who that was for. That might have either been for Sven Paul or Jan Drexler, who is just in front. They are those two running very close to one another. One of them had a little bit of a trip through the inside of the second chicane. But almost the end part of this championship is actually going to come down to a battle of friendship, as ridiculous as that sounds, within those teams, about who is more willing to give up some positions over one another. And right now, because it really could go either way, I would say that Nicholas Houben has probably the greater chance of being given a position from his teammate Bastian Richter, because Bastian hasn't been in any of the previous rounds of this season. So I believe he has purely turned up to help Nicholas as much as he can. Same for Florian as well. Whereas, the likes of Jardier, Valentine, Samet, they've been running their own championship the entire time. So they've got a bit more invested in this. 12 weeks of racing is a long time. And, they've got a bit more invested in this championship. They might not be competing exactly for prizes, given their positions in the standings, but that doesn't mean to say that as a sim racer that you're not fighting for pride in terms of where you finish. So it's going to get tricky. I thought that was Jardier about to be sent around by backmarker of Sven Paul, who I think had a bit of a scary entry to the braking zone. Excuse me, that was Jan Drexler, actually, that ended up backing off, and there's allowed his teammate to go through as a result. Meanwhile, further down the order, to see that is Castorino, who is having a very peaceful time. He may have only turned up for the last round of the season, but I'll tell you what, I mean, what a debut so far from him. Absolutely unflappable so far this race, and has been in a commanding position. Just 20 minutes left to go. No reader for Kate Kramer Racing Esports on his recovery drive. Has found his way up to the back of Kay Zeisler, so I do expect that he will be able to make his way past. And yeah, definitely to say that Nicholas, I mean, in fairness, he has somewhat even up the odds. Like I was describing earlier, Grantus really throughout most of his championship has had sort of 3 other teammates alongside him, whereas Nicholas has kind of run around solo. So it's, I think, fair that he's brought a couple into this final round. And right now, that could be an absolute deal breaker for this championship. Down the inside then, Noah Eder looks to go nice and easily done by the looks of it into turn 1. And the Keiko Racing Esports driver continues to push on and see if he can recover any more positions at the moment. Looking back at some of these gaps for Endurcop starting to kind of re-establish himself into the gearbox of Kareckas. Kareckas. See the difference in lines there. Kareckas stays incredibly tight to that inside line. I think that's because fundamentally the Porsche has the grip to do it. He can shorten up the racing line, and whilst Florian is heading very wide on the outside line, the other thing is he's breaking the toe, which clearly, with the straight line speed of that BMW, it's gained 0.4 of a second down the start-finish straight alone. And in actual fact, this is going to get a little bit awkward because, see, there's the back marker. It's actually going to be relatively easy, I think, for both of them. Thankfully, I think that may have been Sven Paul getting very tidily out the way for Kareckas and Duacop there. But Duacop, he's had a couple of goes, hasn't been able to pull off anything just yet, but he is looking the faster of the two. And yes, if brought, I mean, the Unicorns of Love lineup is quite an extensive roster, but so is the Yassi Veloce one. So really, I think both teams had quite the opportunity to bring the whole gang together on that front. Although, in actual fact, thinking about it, I think Fether, I'm not sure how much racing he's done on the LFM platform, and he may not qualify for top split, as ridiculous as that sounds, because his license may not have been high enough. So that's actually another factor in all of this. It does rely on your relative elo to get into these splits. If you are new to the world of LFM and sort of the championships we have going on, Zeisler, I said that Noria was going to run away with this one. Zeisler actually staying very much in the wheel tracks of that K-Chrome Racing esports car. But if you are new to the world of LFM, first of all, welcome. These are the sorts of chaotic and wonderful championship races that we have had going on over the last 12 weeks, where it is going down to the wire with some fantastic prizes as well. The way that this format is set up, this is the Pro Series specifically by CaseKing.de, but overall, in terms of LFM, you have a split system based on your LFM license, which is a combination of your ELO, which is effectively a skill rating, and also your safety rating, as here comes Florian once again, looking to the outside. He was a little bit more calculating in terms of not compromising his line too much this time around. I think I actually want to go on board with, or we'll stand by the cockpit view for that one, because the margins are so fine between these drivers. But then when you sign up for a race, amongst the many other people on the LFM platform, which is up to an astonishing, let's bring out the numbers just to double check for a moment, because we close in on 100,000 users bit by bit, 97,359 users on the LFM platform. That's a big slide for the BMW there, and all of the drivers kicking out the gravel as they're making their way through the first Lesmo and again into the second Lesmo. I think the comment earlier on about the straights looking a bit dusty, I think that was why. So all kicking off further down the field between Jonathan Clifford and Soldatov then. So we'll see if we can catch a little bit of a glimpse what happened between these two. But when you sign up for a race, your ELO and your license type ends up effectively positioning you into splits, so you end up with similarly skilled drivers around you, and then you can have some fantastic intense racing exactly like this. So, sort of went down the inside, looked all fine there. Clifford got a little bit close for comfort, a small bonk onto the left rear corner, but in actual fact, not too much in the way of harm done in the end. Meanwhile, looking back here, here's Kareckas, and here's Florian Ducop. I said we'll go on board with him, and we will, because he is very close, and the BMW gains about 0.4 of a second down the start-finish straight. Which way does he look? Kareckas, he has to defend the inside line once more. What he's had to do every single time. Florian, is he trying to stick it around at the outside? He is, and he's done it absolutely beautifully. And Karekkas' chances of taking the championship get even more dire, as Florian Ducop may have done the magical positions of moves here the Unicorns of Love would have been absolutely craving him to do as he gets up into P10. It may not seem all too special, but in the grand schemes of this championship, that is possibly the nail in the coffin for the Veloce team. And even with Yassi, if they do end up giving over 2 positions to Kareckas, as long as Houben does get that position from Richter, it would actually end up going back the way of Houben in all of that. But it's very close. Oh, I thought Kareckas would have an opportunity there, but he has to sustain the pressure. He needs to force Florian into a mistake. We've seen the Florian, he is susceptible to making some unforced errors, and but he was pushing exceptionally hard. The BMW has seemed like the faster car overall in this race, and now he needs to execute that pace. He needs to use that straight line speed, defend like a lion, and Kareckas right now, who has absolutely been in stellar form all season long, may have just a sniff of an opportunity to bring this one back into favour down towards Parabolica, but the straight line speed of that BMW is absolutely mighty. And it's a drive-through for Florian Ducop. A drive-through if the chat is on point there. Florian, after managing to get the move done, and I do think that maybe him coming into the pits, disaster! And I told you can't count this one out until the end, because Florian, in all of the pushing that he has been doing during this race, he goes from hero to zero. And the Unicorns Love team, I imagine, will have their heads in their hands right now, as the young gun, the number 12, after getting that position over Kareckas, now potentially hands it back into favour, and Kareckas will breathe a sigh of relief. He still has work to do. It's still not over and done with yet, because with the calculations that we've kind of got going on at the moment, it still looks like it might go towards Houben, but Florian Ducop was definitely the thing that was going to make it almost impossible for Kareckas to win. Now with 40 minutes left to go, it comes back towards being in the realms of possibility. Reed has brought out the yellow flag. He's gone off on the exit of the Ascari chicane. What a final indeed we have. It's all kicking off in the last round of Season 10. This is what we've been treated to all season long, where you cannot predict anything. We have this nail-biting action week in, week out, and the championship, the way it's played out, is no different. Norida, as he came through, Ascari then just had a little bit of a wiggle into the ground. He goes, and it went back the other way. I think he kept it out of the wall. And Kay Zeisler really had to stomp on the brakes there not to collide, and ends up going into 23rd position. So, how things stand right now, from what we understand, if Houben finishes in P5, Kareckas needs P8. That means he would need both of those positions from Jardier and Valentine. And we are probably, well, I imagine that if Veloce / Yassit would do that for Kareckas, I can only begin to imagine that Bastian Richter will do the same for Niklas Houben, and giving him the crucial position he needs in order to take the championship. But it's going to come down to the final lap, because we won't know what any of these guys' plans are until the end. Philip Gross over the back of Michael Frey, and a bit optimistic on the brakes. It must be said, it looked very dramatic, very exciting, and ends up with a little bit of a trip across the inside of that chicane. I imagine that Porsche will go through in just a second to reclaim that position, and he does. And the Swiss driver goes up in towards P11 once more, but these two looks like they will be scrapping in just a short while once more. So we'll have a look further up the grid. Marco Bischoff versus Jardier. That's a battle that's been heating up. As you see the little kind of Yassi sandwich that we've got here for the K Kramer Racing Esports car acting as the filling. Whether these Yassi cars end up moving out of position when we get to the tail end of this race, we'll have to wait and see. But Bischoff trying to see if he can get himself up to P7. His P3 in this championship, I do believe, is fairly secure. His P3 in the standings at the moment, Walsingham is his next nearest contender, and then Jardier was the next driver to actually sort of be putting on pressure, but even if they stayed as they are, the points difference was still very much going in favour of Bischoff. So Bischoff looks comfortable for taking P3 in this championship, which I think I'll be fairly pleased with. I do, admittedly, I forget where he finished last season, but you know, bear in mind, this used to be the man that was number 1 on the LFM platform. He now sits number 2 on the overall standings, so still exceptionally quick. He's a 2-time Pro Series champion, but it's been a little bit of a struggle for Marco in recent times. He has had moments of brilliance, hasn't taken a victory this season, which is uncharacteristic to see from him, but maybe when we make our way into Season 11, he will start to find a bit of form once more and be up to the top of the standings. We'll have to wait and see. Jardier bring out white flags, a little bit cautious on the overlay, but he has a good chance, actually, Jardier, to get up into P4. He won't make it into those podium positions, so he will unfortunately end up missing out on getting a prize at the end of this. But with Walsingham having dropped out of this race, I think entirely, I think he has retired from this. Jardier does have a good opportunity to get himself up into P4 in the standings, so he is not going to want to allow Bischoff through, and of course that gives him a little bit more of an incentive to not hand a position to Kareckas. So it's going to be tricky in terms of decision making. See, Nicholas Houben, after dropping to around a second behind his teammate, has got back within a few tenths, as the pair of them actually not quite on the pace of Jade Hutchinson last time round. It was a 46.9 on the previous lap for Hutchinson, down to 47.3, 47.6 for Richter, 47.3 for Nicholas Houben. The only driver still consistently lapping in the 46s, of course, is your race leader, Amadeo Castorino, who we've barely seen on screen, but his race pace and his performance across qualifying in this race have been absolutely exceptional. So, you know, a huge congratulations to him. Of course, still has 9.5 minutes to go. Anything could happen. LFM has told us that time and time again, so we won't count our chickens just yet. But certainly a commanding performance so far from the McLaren driver. Bischoff still applying the pressure off. Oh, a fantastic mix of words. Marco still applying the pressure to Jardier then for P7. And yet again, so, you know, even with some DNFs, his championship tally has been good. He's been another driver who hasn't had the best overall performances, but he's been consistent. Exactly the same way with Nicholas Houben, who it looks like won't be wrapping up this championship with a victory anytime soon, but he's kept himself up there time and time again. And he did, of course, have that no-show, I believe, in round 9, but whenever he's been competing, I think other than maybe one occasion, we have not seen that Unicorns Love Mercedes outside of the top 5, and that is what has put that car in the fighting position it is in. Grant Kareckas still 8 seconds adrift of Valentine, so he certainly won't be looking to get any of those positions on pace alone. With 8.5 minutes left on the clock, as white flag out again for Manuel Fuchs. Not sure, maybe had a little bit of a... Oh! Bastian Richter! Oh, that was the overlay. Give me a bit of a fright. Bastian Richter, it said, was coming into the pit lane there. So I had a horrible feeling that the other Unicorns Love car was going to have a drive-through, which if it had have done, oh, that would have been tight. I don't even want to think about whether or not Kareckas would have ended up making his way past in all of that, because whilst it would have gifted the position to Houben, it may well have ended up gifting one over to Kareckas as well. Meanwhile, no time to think about that, as Noah Reeder is into the pits entirely. So the other K Kramer Racing Esports car not having a great time, unfortunately, and is sitting in the pits. Not quite sure what the cause of that has been. As here again, gravel being kicked up. Just another point on Casarino's pace, because he hasn't had much screen time. We'll actually get a little bit of a look at that McLaren at the moment. We have seen this McLaren. Look how comfortable it is over that curve. That's an extremely happy car right now. I've never seen a car feel glide over those apexes at Ascari anywhere near as much as that McLaren is doing today. But he's almost 20 seconds ahead of anyone else in the field and has consistently lapped in the 46s. It's barely been a lap where he's fallen outside of it. And he has just been in an absolute class of his own. Zampedri has been driving very well, but he currently sits in P2. Of course, he has a little bit of an instance with Richter earlier on. But these McLarens, I tell you what, their pace around here at Monza today has been nothing short of exceptional. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of drivers taking note from when they make the choices for Season 11 over when perhaps that McLaren now comes into the frame as something that is up for the pickings. So, 6.5 minutes then of racing left to go. I think that should translate to about 4 laps in this race if my calculations are correct, as Marco Bischoff continues to sustain the pressure onto the back of Jardier, who's getting a little bit of a tow actually off Moritz Lerner, who these two have been reeling in over the last few laps. The Lamborghini driver, who showed some really good pace earlier on, actually dropping back a little bit in these closing stages, and is going to make this a very busy group. Whether or not that results in any calamities in the final stages, Kareckas comes soaring on through. We'll only have to wait and see. But it is certainly a group that is just gradually becoming a bit more bunched over time. And if they continue to bunch at the rate they have over the last few laps, we could actually very much see a 3 or maybe even a 4-way fight for P6 on the final lap of this race, which would be very exciting, though we have enough nail-biting action to be dealing with. Trying to stay on top of, I must admit, Oliver Martins in the number 23 BMW, trying to hunt down the number 27 of Samuel Ratz in that Ferrari, and it's looking like he's got himself in a good place, although blue flags for Martins as our race leader looks to come through, and he will lift off and look to get out of the way as Castorino comes through. And just looking at the clock again, I think so. I think there'll be 3 more laps to go, including this one in all of that, as Bastian Richter got a big slide there, and all of a sudden Bastian Richter has found himself in a very close fighting position with Hutchinson. Now this gets scary because Houben, he's not exactly with him, and this group for the podium positions, they suddenly started to bunch. This could all go down to the wire as well. Is he in a position to do anything down towards turn 1 this time around? The answer's not quite. They've got Zeisler just in front in the form of a back marker. Meanwhile, we've got Lerner, Honzik, and Bischoff all blasting their way down towards turn 1 as well. I still have no idea how this is going to play out. I think we're going to have to do a complete evaluation at the end, or at least our best guess at one, when possible swaps and everything come into place. But it's all getting very tricky and busy in the closing couple of laps of this race then, as Jardier continues to apply the pressure to Lerner. Bischoff hasn't quite been able to stick with him in the way that he was over the last few laps. As they get in towards that second chicane, bit deep under brakes there for the Lamborghini. We're on board with Jardier with that screaming flat 6 in the back of this car, trying to see if he can make a last-ditch move on one of the final laps of the race, although if he does go for it, makes it difficult to believe he may be handing positions back to his teammates, or a sort of unofficial teammate. Of course, sister teams, like I say, between Yassit and Veloce, so there is definitely the relation there. Jardier looking up the inside, the straight line speed, though, of that Lamborghini, just a little bit too much to overcome at the moment. 0.3 of a second gap as well between Richter and Hutchinson. Compromise line, though, for Jardier, and Bischoff absolutely on the case immediately. So that's allowed Moritz Lerner to breathe a sigh of relief, and Bischoff now the one that's going on the attack towards the outside. He goes, and let's see Bischoff trying to see if he can make a move in towards Parabolica. Doesn't look like he can. And so they will stay as they were in 7th and 8th place respectively. They have 2 more laps left to go. Richter hasn't been able to do anything about Hutchinson down towards that first chicane, and it was a bit of a wonky line there as well. So he's dropped back a little bit. Someone, though, that has not dropped back an inch. Bischoff, does he dive towards the inside? No! Patience executed then from the German driver as he tries to size up an opportunity. This is bringing Valentine bit by bit into the fight as well. But not quite within striking distance. Hasn't quite had the pace of this group in front, but as they do battle that little bit more, a bit at a time, he is able to reel in the gap. Last lap from your race leader, 47.5. I think maybe slightly hindered from traffic, but you know, when you compare that, that is still the same pace that a lot of these guys that are running solo are having. So, you know, just goes to show exactly the sort of margin of pace that he has had. 47.0 from Zampedri, so still very good pace late on in this race from some of these cars, as this will be the beginnings then of the final lap. So just 90 odd seconds left to go in this race before we crown a champion for Season 10 in the Case King Pro Series. Bastian Richter still trying to apply the pressure to Jade Hutchinson. He's running out of opportunities, especially if he does look to hand over position to his teammate that's now dropped back to 2 seconds. So Houben has not had the easiest of times over the last lap or so, trying to stick with his teammate. Very clear of the likes of Lerner behind, but he will be watching very eagerly with what Richter is trying to size up for the podium. Doesn't look to make a move on Hutchinson, who stays in P3 for now then. This group as well, with the likes of Lerner, Honzig, Bischoff, all charging down towards turn 1 themselves. Bischoff trying to send one down the inside. This is when he commits to trying to go for the move. Side-by-side action, very close to the pair of them. Steckenberg's brought out the yellow flag on the exit of Ascari. Some sort of instant for him there, but these two, they stay as they were. And Jardier, that is he giving up the position to Bischoff, because that looked like a pretty easily conceded one there. And Valentine seemingly has dropped back a little bit as well. Kareckas now within 6 seconds or so of this group. So are the Veloce/Yassit drivers executing their plan to hand over positions to their teammate? And if so, is Bastian Richter going to do the same? Because if those two do swap positions, Richter, he needs to make the call first in order to do this, because it's going to get very, very close between our drivers. One, though, that has been in an absolute league of his own. Amadeo Castorino, take a bow. It's his home circuit, his debut, and the first McLaren victory in the 720S Evo in the Pro Series. Amazing stuff from him to win by almost 19 seconds. Zampedri is going to come into the final turn as well. See what he can do to take a fantastic P2. But what about Bastian Richter? I think he is slowing by the looks of it. And with that being done, it's going to be pretty close. Oh, I'm not confident in this. He is going to slow down. And I think with that, we're pretty sure with the tallies, Nicholas Houben, I believe if you're Season 10 Case King Pro Series champion, after not taking a victory all season long, Kareckas is going to take these 2 extra positions away from his Yassit and Veloce teammates. They do play ball, but with Houben taking P4, Kareckas taking P8, I think it's not quite going to be enough in the closing parts of this race. It's going to be very tricky. Although, I'm just looking back, actually, at my sheet, I've got... I don't know, because at this reference, I've also got here that Kareckas needed to be P10 if Houben's finished in P4, so I'm not sure. Maybe if we've had some... with all the assistants in the chat, I think maybe points tallying-wise, I'm going to take a stab in the dark here, and I believe that in actual fact, apologies, that Kareckas, I think, is your Season 10 champion. It's been mighty, mighty close between the 2 drivers. It's going to go down to a difference of just a handful of points after, you know, we're talking tallies of the thousands. And Grantas Kareckas, with his 2 teammates handing him the positions at the very end, I believe has taken the championship victory. We'll wait for the official results to come through. But I do believe that is how they have finished after a nail-biting end to his race. And the server immediately exploding upon impact. And I wonder if that is the everyone trying to get things together to go through and confirm the championship results. I think that may well be the case. And I do believe that it may be right in the chat. I think there was a little bit of debating in the chat. I thought for a moment the Houben may have had enough to do it, but I think in reference to the original, the original kind of points differences required between those drivers, if Houben finished P10, Kareckas, if Houben finished P4, Kareckas could only have finished a maximum of P10 in that race. And in the end, with Jardier and Valentine giving him positions, he finished in P8. So I think it's gone down to the wire between the pair of them. But I do believe that it has gone the way of Kareckas. We'll wait for final confirmation in just a moment. We'll just have a look also if there was anything else stewarding inquiries-wise. I don't believe there was, as we are still a little bit in the unknown, trying to know exactly what's happened. Here are your official results from the race at the very least. So Amadeo Castorino takes victory ahead of Zampedri and Hutchinson around out the top three, with Houben, Richter, Lerner, Bischoff, Kareckas, Jardier, Barrier rounding out the top 10, with Frey, Gross, Pendant, Conrad and Duakop seeing to the end of the top 15. Fuchs, Simonov, Schneckenberger, Solstov, Clifford, Ratz, Martins, Zeisler, Paul, Eder, Drexler, Walsingham, Vassner, and Fock rounding out your final positions in this field. And I am looking to see if we have the updated championship standings, still waiting for those to come through for official confirmation. We do, though, have Castorino that is sitting in the interview room for us to talk to, so we will certainly look to bring him in and have a little chat with our race winner from today, because without a doubt he has been in fantastic form. So Amadeo Castorino, fantastic race from you. You must be proud as punch with that one. Such dominant race from you. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good now. It was my first race there, and yeah, I think I can say it was a good start in this league. Unfortunately, it was the last race, but for sure, if I can, I do the next season.
Yeah, I mean, what a way to, put your name in the top split of the Pro Series. Absolutely incredible performance from you. And of course, also, the first time we've actually seen the 720S Evo in the top split as well. And I mean, it looked like a pretty competitive car from where we were sitting, and we were watching you go through Ascari in particular, and it just looked like the car was just floating its way over the coast. Was that how it felt to drive, or was it a bit of a misperception on our front, or was it just really just at ease with this circuit?
Yeah, for sure the McLaren Evo is the best car in this track. And yeah, as you say, especially on the Ascari, it's a very good car because it's very easy on the curves. So yeah, and I'm feeling really good with this car. I think I had a good setup for my driving style, so I'm pretty happy of the result.
Yeah, I can imagine you are. It was absolutely exceptional. Qualifying, you were absolutely stellar, and then from the race, you got into a groove. You were more or less the only driver to consistently lap in the 46s from start to finish, and was just you were in a league of your own. So incredible stuff from you. It'd be wonderful to have you back for next season. And if we were to have you back, I know that you may have some debating to do, but do you think you'd be turning up in the McLaren for season 11 if you do join us for LFM? Because obviously it worked pretty well for you this evening.
Yeah, not sure, but probably is the favorite choice in this moment because I'm feeling very good with the McLaren, and it's pretty good in a very big range of track. Is a good car, so yeah, probably yes.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to hopefully having you with us in Season 11. Again, massive congratulations to you for tonight's qualifying and race victory, taking the double in all of that, and a very, very dominant performance, and one of the most dominant performances that I think I've actually seen in the Pro Series in a very long time. So exceptional stuff from you. So yeah, and thank you for popping in for a quick interview as well. It's always nice to speak to our race winners from each week. So yeah, huge congratulations. Enjoy the break, and hopefully see you back in a couple of weeks or so time.
Thank you very much. See you in the next time.
Cheers, Amadeo. So great stuff there to hear from our race winner. And I'm still waiting to try to get official confirmation, because I've already possibly made a small hash of it once already in terms of the way it sits. I do believe that Kareckas is your champion, but I just want to get an official rundown of the results, so we will hang about just a little bit. I'm also going to ask in the background, see if I can get some confirmation as well. Try to see if I can not turn off my microphone this time around, which is exactly what I ended up doing. But we shall get word on that. But from what I understand, Kareckas is your champion, but we will hang about until, like I say, we have confirmation on all of that. But without a shadow of a doubt, between Nicholas Houben and Kareckas, they have both put on an absolutely stellar series of performances all season long. 4 victories going the way of Kareckas after entering season 10 without a single victory to his name. And how times change and how quickly you can go from being someone that ends up hanging around as, always being there or thereabouts, but, when push comes to shove, kind of, you wouldn't have necessarily have put your bets on Grantus on, a number of occasions, because it's always been the likes of Bischoff, Jardier on occasions as well, so, Luke Whitehead, Boothby, that have been those drivers that have been able to just deliver that little bit extra to get it over the line and take victory. And that was something that Kareckas just didn't quite have in previous seasons. So to turn it around, as strongly as he has, and put together such a stellar season, he should be very, very proud of that. And same goes to Nicholas Houben. I see that that we've got suggestion that Houben was a bit disappointed, which, if my understanding now of how things sit is correct, is understandable. He drove his heart out. He never brought home a victory, but he was mightily consistent. He was very, very consistent throughout the season, and fundamentally, Nicholas kind of had the season that Kareckas has had for the last 2. He never took a victory, but he was always there. He was always at the front of the field, battling against the best. Of course, the McLarens did run away a bit today, and I imagine he'll be a little bit probably disheartened, because if those McLarens hadn't have been there this evening, we could have had a very different lineup at the front of the field, and with the way things could have shuffled around, who knows what sort of impact that could have had. So, Houben, he may be a bit disappointed with that, but certainly has a lot to be proud of. There's no doubt about that. I have had complete official confirmation that Kareckas is your champion of Season 10, so massive congratulations to him. I'm hoping that we may get him in the Cosbox for an interview. And there we go. We do now have the full set of standings. So there you go. By 24 points, Kareckas ends up taking the top prize here in the Pro Series, ahead of Houben and Marco Bischoff rounding out top 3. Jardier did get himself up in a P4 in the head, ahead of Walsingham, and then the likes of Teemu Karppinen in P6 at the end of that one. It was very, very close in terms of a championship tally at the end of that, because look at the numbers that we're talking here. We're talking in the thousands, 13,000 or so points at the very top of this leaderboard, and the championship margin went down to 24. That in itself summarizes exactly how close this season has been, exactly what the Pro Series continues to deliver every single time, and is just something we've almost taken for granted. We kind of enter each race expecting all the drama, all the chaos, and you can never predict what's going to happen, and it was an absolutely fantastic performance from him. Record number of wins for the Kareckas this season. I think I don't believe he may have taken that record. That record quite possibly, let's see, can I quickly go back into the archives to double check? So last season we had maximum of 2 victories for both Whitehead and Marco Bischoff. In towards Season 8. Before that, where Marco had a very strong championship. Of course, we also had Massier in sort of the fight for some of those. I can't quite see some of the tallies, annoyingly, for those. Let's see if I can dig those out from somewhere else. And in those, it's difficult to say. I feel like I haven't quite got the tallies from the likes of Season 6 and Season 7, where Marco has some very, very strong championship performances there, and may have a slightly higher record for number of wins. I'm not 100% certain, is the honest answer. I shall do some digging at some point and make sure to address that when we get into Season 11. But certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, I mean, it's an almost, in terms of contributing scores to his tally, it's an almost 50% win rate for Kareckas, which in a field like this is just, not enough words can be said about how incredible a performance that is. And he's still quite a young driver, has developed so quickly in terms of his racing potential over the last couple of years. And, where he is, he's in a very happy place. He's performing very, very well. And I'm sure that he will continue to get even better. What a fantastic momentum for him to carry in to Season 11 as well. And a massive congratulations over to him. Also, of course, congratulations to Katarina, who may or may not be aware, considering it a debut, they will, of course, have that €100 voucher for Glorious Gaming products by CaseKing.de, who, of course, have been the title sponsor for this championship and make all of this possible and make all of these prizes and level of production possible as well. So big thank you to all of them. I'm hanging around hoping that Kareckas or Houben or somebody might pop in for another interview, but it's looking less and less likely. Maybe celebrating with his teammates in their own chats and maybe just fundamentally breathing a sigh of relief, because it was looking a bit dicey from time to time, it must be said. But in the end, he did what he needed to do. He brought it home, and commiserations to Houben, who drove brilliantly as well, but not quite enough in the end to see that Unicorns of Love Mercedes taking victory overall. So, with that all said and done, that is it for Season 10. It has been an absolutely fantastic championship and another treat for us all to enjoy here at LFM. It's been a pleasure bringing you once again all of the coverage for that throughout the season, and very much looking forward to getting underway for Season 11 as well, to see what happens when we have the McLarens being brought into the frame, because I imagine there's going to be a fair few drivers that will be turning up with those in the arsenal. Will it be a clean sweep of McLarens? Not quite sure. We obviously have some quite dominant Porsche fields in the past. Don't think it'll quite go that way, but another manufacturer to add to the mix, and that always gives us that extra bit of excitement, seeing how it's going to play out throughout the entirety of next season, where drivers, I'm sure, will be pushing to see what they can continue to find as we learn more and more about these cars, the 1.9 update, and of course all these new tracks that we've been treated to over recent months in ACC. So thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you have all enjoyed this incredible finale. Once again, a massive, massive congratulations. Apologies, got a little bit messy in the announcements at the time, but a massive congratulations to Kareckas, your Season 10 champion, and a stellar, stellar performance from him, and very, very well deserved. Houben taking a very deserving P2, and also Bischoff taking P3 in the standings. If you have enjoyed what you have been watching tonight, then look to subscribe to the channel so you can stay in tune for all of what we have coming up in the near future as well, where you can see more of the Case King Pro Series as we get into its 11th iteration and continue to head towards that 100,000 user milestone on the LFM platform. If you want to contribute towards that milestone, you've had a little bit of a look at the racing that you've seen this evening, you fancy a bit of the action yourself, much like Amadea did in joining us for this final race, then do head over to the LFM website, lowfuelmotorsport.com, get yourself signed up and get yourself a license and you can work your way up through the ranks and start to enter these fantastic championships. Of course, there's also participating in the daily racing that LFM hosts across a number of different categories on both ACC and also R Factor 2, where you can have a little bit of everything from touring cars, sports cars, single-seaters, prototypes, you name it. And if you want to dabble in the scary shenanigans of a Nordschleife, you can even do things like that. There's a little bit of something for everybody. Or, of course, feel free to join us here over on the ACC side of things. As you can see, it's a pretty stellar place to be, so we'd love to have you here on the grid. And if you just want to stay in touch with the community as it continues to grow and expand with all of you wonderful people, then also look to join our Discord server as well, where you can just talk to people about everything joyous sim racing, real racing. It's a wonderful community, very friendly, welcoming to all abilities, all familiarities with sim racing, and certainly will be a place where you can make some great friends. So also look to do that. So with all of that said and done, thank you everybody so much for watching all the way throughout tonight, and those who have been joining all of the streams throughout Season 10. Look forward to seeing you back in Season 11 in a couple of weeks' time, where it'll all kick off once again. New championship contender, a repeat winner. We'll have to wait and see. But until then, it's goodbye.